Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepy Disclosure Project. Tonight's journey leads us not into fantasy, but into a monument so real, so immovable, that it defies explanation even after thousands of years. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands silent, yet it still unsettles. Was it a tomb, a monument, or, as some whisper, something stranger? A machine of stone and geometry, not for the dead, but for power itself. The desert at night does not sleep. The air cools quickly, but the stones hold the day's heat, breathing it back into the sky. Wind slides across the plateau, carrying the faint smell of dust and camel hide, and the city's glow lingers low on the horizon. You stand at the base of the Great Pyramid. It rises above you not like a ruin, but like a presence. Sharp angles where nature would curve, geometry where mountains would crumble. In daylight it commands through scale. At night it commands through silence. Each block beneath your hand feels less like history than hardware. Warm from the day, yet unyielding, as though it was built not to honour time, but to resist it. Imagine how it once looked. Smooth casing stones of polished limestone covered the entire structure, gleaming in the sun so brightly that travellers wrote of it as if it glowed. With a capstone of gold or electrum flashing at the summit, it must have been visible for miles. A beacon of light carved into stone. What you see now is a skeleton. What once stood was a mirror to the sky, and yet the closer you look, the stranger it becomes. This pyramid, unlike the tombs of later pharaohs, carries no inscriptions, no painted ceilings, no prayers carved into walls. Its surfaces are bare. The desert wind is its only text. It does not explain itself, and so you stand in the hush of night, your hand on stone, listening to silence that feels deliberate. You tilt your head back, following the slope upward until your eyes lose the edge against the stars. Once, a capstone crowned this summit. Ancient accounts say it may have been clad in gold or electrum blazing in sunlight. Others suggest it was never placed at all, withheld, as if the final piece of a puzzle we were not meant to solve. Without it, the pyramid feels unfinished, like a circuit awaiting closure. Step inside, and the silence becomes heavier. Narrow passages lead you upward, the air close, stale with centuries. At last you enter the king's chamber. The walls are granite, quarried from Aswan hundreds of miles away. At the centre sits a single coffer, hewn from a single block of stone. Too large to have been moved through the passages, it must have been set in place before the chamber was sealed. And unlike the decorated sarcophagi of the Valley of the Kings, this box is bare. No prayers, no figures, no colour, only emptiness. It waits, as if it were not designed for a body at all, but for something else. Odd stories cling to this chamber. Napoleon Bonaparte once spent a night alone inside. When he emerged at dawn, his face was pale, his eyes unsettled. Asked what he had experienced, he refused to answer. Only on his deathbed did he begin to speak, and then stopped himself, whispering, "You would not believe me." The pyramid does not shout its purpose. It whispers, through the missing capstone, through the bare coffer, through a silence that feels more deliberate than neglect. And the deeper you go, the more you sense it. This structure was not built to tell stories in paint and symbol. It was built to do something. Stand again outside and let your gaze trace the shafts that angle through the pyramid's chambers. For centuries they were thought to be simple air vents, but their alignments betray intention. One shaft points toward Orion's belt, the three-star constellation the Egyptians linked to Osiris, god of death and rebirth. Another faces Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, whose rising marked the flood of the Nile and the new year. These are not random. They are choices cut in stone with a precision that turns architecture into astronomy. Imagine the scene thousands of years ago. The pyramid gleams, its white casing stones catching starlight. A capstone of gold, perhaps, flashing at the summit. Inside, the shafts channel not air but light, linking chamber to sky. It feels less like a tomb than an instrument, tuned to the heavens, part of some vast rhythm between earth and stars. And yet its silence remains louder than its alignments. Every other royal tomb in Egypt is crowded with words, prayers to the gods, warnings to thieves, star maps and painted guides for the soul. The Great Pyramid says nothing. No hymns, no spells, no instructions, just geometry, stone, and silence. If you pause now, hand resting against a block still warm from the sun, you feel something unsettling, as if you're touching not a memorial, but a dormant mechanism. Some explorers have felt it too. Conquerors entered it, scholars measured it, Napoleon fled it. And still the pyramid refuses to explain. That refusal is why it endures in imagination, why it lingers not just as stone but as a question. So as the desert wind moves around you and the stars lean close, you ask what has been asked for centuries. If this was not a tomb, then what was it? You wake to the thud of wooden mallets on limestone. The sound is steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat carried across the dusty air. A rooster crows somewhere beyond the mud brick walls. You roll onto your side and fine grit clings to your lips, the desert finding its way into every corner. Outside, the overseer's voice cuts across the morning like a blade, sharp and practiced. Already men are gathering ropes, sledges and jars of water. This is the workers' village, not a place of kings or priests, but of tens of thousands of ordinary people whose lives turned stone into monument. Houses are small, built of mud brick, packed close together in neat rows. Smoke seeps from clay ovens where bread is already baking, the smell mingling with onions and garlic. Archaeologists would later uncover these very hearths, the broken bread moulds and beer jars that tell us more about daily life than any carved inscription. Graffiti too has survived. On blocks meant for eternity, workers scratched quick messages. The drunkards of Menkaure, the friends of Khufu. These were not anonymous slaves ground down to silence, but gangs of men with identities, pride, even humour. It's the same instinct that makes modern crews scrawl their names on steel girders before skyscraper walls cover them. Imagine a sunburned worker pausing at the end of a shift, laughing as he scratches the name of his team into the stone. That mark outlasted his life by 4,000 years. Food bound this community together. Bread and fish, garlic and onions, salted cuts of meat on rare days. But the true sustenance was beer. Thick, yeasty, nearly a meal in itself. It was issued daily in heavy jars. Some scholars estimate each worker drank a gallon or two per day. Beer was hydration, calories and reward all in one. If you've ever carried something heavy up a flight of stairs, imagine hauling a granite block across the sand under the Egyptian sun. Now double the weight in your mind. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Could you imagine doing it with only bread, onions and beer to keep you moving? The skeletons left behind speak of lives both strained and cared for. Many show arthritis in the spine, knees worn thin, shoulders ground down by endless hauling. But there are also bones that tell of healing. Breaks that mended, injuries tended. Someone was looking after them. This was not the work of a disposable slave army, but of a workforce managed, fed and maintained. The pyramid was too vast to risk losing people needlessly. You walk the village in imagination. Children run between homes carrying water skins nearly as large as themselves. Women grind grain at low stone querns, arms rising and falling in steady rhythm. Men gather around sledges, wrapping fresh rope around wooden beams, spitting into their palms for grip. It is noisy, alive and oddly familiar. Strip away the centuries, and it feels less like a myth and more like a construction site. Dusty, loud, weary, but full of camaraderie. And yet, as the sun climbs higher and the workers march toward the plateau, a different thought presses in. The graffiti tells us who they were. The bread and beer explain how they survived. but none of it explains why their labour was directed into such precise geometry. Stone fitted tighter than modern brickwork, passages angled to stars. The village explains the effort. The pyramid itself demands a different explanation. You join a quarry crew at a swan far upriver, where the granite rises like a dull red tide. Morning heat shimmers on the face. Men lift dolerite pounders and let them fall in patient rhythms, blows ringing through your ribs, chips skitter. A foreman stripes a shallow line with red ochre to mark the split. Wooden pegs are tapped into drill holes and doused. Swelling wood becomes a quiet wedge. The seam sighs open. No miracle, just force, water and time. Dust cakes your tongue. The quarry floor is a web of half-freed blocks and hammerstones rounded like river eggs. A boy fetches water skins. A scribe keeps the tallyboard clean. When a block breaks true, a dozen shoulders crowd the sled. Ropes creak. The load noses toward a slip where the Nile will lift what legs cannot. Scene shift. The barge. Tar and pitch sweeten the air. The hull creaks like an old chest. The north wind fills the square sail, while the current runs south to north. The double kindness that makes Egypt possible. The pilot squints for eddies and sandbars, one hand on the tiller, the other on a knotted-sounding line. To starboard, reeds whisper and herons lift. To port, the desert leans close. Below, the smell of beer rises, the boatman's ration. You lie on cargo netting and feel the stones cold through the weave. The crew sings to keep time as oars bite for a tight bend. A boy at the mast reads the telltales, calling gusts. When the sail booms, the block shifts a knuckle's width, and everyone holds breath until the river steadies. The song returns, softer now. Another shift. The riverbank at Giza, loud with timing. Floodwater has softened the landings. Ramps wait slicked with silt and watered sand. A drum sounds. Haulers lean in, and the sled grinds forward. Lever men wedge bars beneath the runners and rock the mass in short, disciplined breaths. At the head, a man walks backward with a bucket, spilling a sheen along the track because someone learned damp grains cut friction in half. No prayer required, just physics in bare feet. Chaos is only on the surface. Beneath it, ledgers rule. A scribe counts jars issued to this gang and notes a broken runner. In the shade, a rope maker twists palm fibre and tests each coil by feel. A healer binds a torn palm with linen. The overseer holds his voice even, saving sharpness for the moment rhythm falters. Management is the hidden tool, as essential as the lever. If you've ever wrestled a couch up a stairwell that turns one corner too many, feel the burn in your hands. Now imagine the stairwell is the Nile's bank after flood, the couch is 50 tons of granite, and the deadline belongs to a king. Where are you listening from tonight? And can you feel that heaviness in your grip? As evening drops, the last stretch from river to plateau becomes a relay. Teams rotate on the ropes. Fresh backs step in as tired ones fall away. At rest points, jars pass hand to hand. A messenger brings a roster change. One crew to the quarry tomorrow, one to the ramp, one to tool repair. The project breathes people the way lungs breathe air, in and out with the season. By firelight you sit with a gang whose name was once scratched into stone. Friends of Khufu, or drunkards of Menkaure, the kind of joke that outlasts bone. They talk about home fields drowned in black silt and a foreman who can hear a slack rope before he sees it. Someone asks how high the pyramid will go. Another answers, high enough to make the river look small. Laughter follows. Low, tired, but real. From quarry face to barge, from barge to bank, from bank to ramp. The path feels clear now. But the last leg is ahead. How stone climbs into the sky and locks to the stars. Tomorrow you will watch the rise. You wake again at dawn, but this time you walk with the overseers. From this vantage, the project reveals its hierarchy. At the top, architects hold measuring cords and wax tablets, speaking more with gestures than shouts. Beneath them, foremen pace like shepherds, responsible for crews of 40 or so. their voices steady but sharp when rhythm falters. Below still, gangs of haulers grip ropes with calloused hands, lever men wedge poles beneath runners, and water carriers keep the sand slick. A pyramid is not stone alone, it is voices, ranks, and rhythm. Scribes kneel in the dust with reed pens and pallets, noting everything. Jars issued, blocks delivered, workers rotated. To them the movement of bread and beer matters as much as granite. A missing ration could unravel morale faster than a broken rope. You picture them in shadow, listening more than watching, their strokes as vital as the hauler's pull. And then the climb. How did the stones rise course upon course until geometry brushed the heavens? The old answer is the long straight ramp, a mile of mud brick stretched before the pyramid, dismantled as stone rose higher. Practical on papyrus, but in reality it would demand more material than the pyramid itself. Still, some argue it was possible, a sheer monument to patience. Others propose zigzagging ramps hugging the pyramid's faces, each turn consuming less earth. More recent voices imagine internal ramps corkscrewing upward, corridors later sealed, their ghosts perhaps still hidden within. And yet, for all these diagrams, none has left definitive traces. This is where speculation slips in. Fringe theorists whisper that no ramps were ever needed at all, that the builders used forgotten techniques now lost to us. Some speak of counterweights swinging blocks upward, others of sound resonance or even tools of copper hardened by secrets we no longer possess. Egyptologists scoff, pointing to sledges, ropes and sweat. But the pyramid remains. And speculation, like sand, always finds cracks to fill. If you've ever heaved something heavy upstairs, remember the way the weight shifts when you lose balance. Now magnify that to 50 tons, and picture a slope of clay beneath your feet. Can you feel the slip in your palms? Imagine doing it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that for 20 years. Where are you listening from tonight? Could you keep that rhythm? By torchlight, you watch a block settle into place. A foreman marks the face with ochre to match its neighbour. A leverman eases the last wedge free. The block kisses stone so tightly a knife sulks at the seam. Then ropes fall slack, and voices rise in relief. Another course complete. The pyramid grows taller while the village shrinks into dots at its base. And yet, the deeper truth resists. Organisation explains how men endured. Ramps explain how stone may have climbed. But neither explains why the design is so precise, why its angles echo the heavens, why its chambers are carved not for decoration but for resonance. You think of the graffiti scratched in jest, the drunkards of Menkaure, the friends of Khufu. They tell us who pulled, who laughed, who drank. But they do not tell us why their sweat was bound into geometry so exact it defies chance. So as night closes on the plateau, you sit with the memory of those names. Ordinary men immortalised in scratches, their humour still echoing across stone. Their voices remind you that the pyramid was built by hands, not myths. But their silence reminds you that purpose lies elsewhere. The haulers gave the pyramid its body. The architects gave it its shape. But what gave it its reason? The passage downward narrows until your shoulders scrape stone. The air is heavy, the taste of dust clinging to your tongue. A torch flame wavers, throwing shadows against blocks that have sat here for more than 4,000 years. The seams remain tight. Other tombs sag and crumble. This one feels engineered to resist not only time, but the earth itself. Above your head is a ceiling that could crush you flat in an instant, yet it does not budge through earthquakes, floods, and centuries of silence. A reminder, this is not just stone, it is certainty stacked. Step outside in imagination to see the body whole. Each side of the pyramid points almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. True north, measured within fractions of a degree. Even now, with satellites and lasers, surveyors marvel at the precision. Hanging a picture frame straight on your wall is hard enough. Imagine doing it with 13 acres of limestone. The base stretches more than 230 metres per side, its corners closing within inches. A miscalculation at the start would have multiplied into disaster at the finish. Yet here, the four edges meet like the corners of a box. The stones themselves weigh 2.5 tons on average, with some reaching nearly 80. Imagine moving a block heavier than a tank and placing it so perfectly that a knife cannot find a seam. Then imagine repeating that act not 10 times, not 100, but over 2 million times without losing alignment. Modern engineers once tried to recreate the process. They heaved blocks across dry sand until their shoulders ached and ropes burned their palms. Nothing moved. Then one man poured water onto the path. Suddenly, the sledge slid forward with ease. The secret was carved into tumart all along. Workers shown wetting sand as they pulled. What modern science rediscovered with equations, the Egyptians had solved with observation. Now step back inside. The grand gallery rises like a throat carved into the heart of the pyramid, steep and impossibly tall. Corbelled blocks lean inward tier by tier until the ceiling disappears into shadow. The space feels mechanical, not ceremonial. Grooves run along the floor as though something once stood there. Niches cut into the walls stand empty, like sockets that lost their fittings long ago. Clap your hands. The sound doesn't die. It lingers. It swells. Some visitors describe it as a hum that grows until it fills your chest, vibrating in your ribs more than in your ears. For them, it feels less like standing in a tomb and more like standing inside an instrument. At the end of this throat waits the king's chamber. Its walls are cut from granite quarried in Aswan, floated hundreds of miles north. Above it rest beams so large that even modern cranes would struggle to lift them, 50 tons apiece stacked layer on layer. Archaeologists say they were set there to relieve pressure. Engineers nod but then point out the obvious. Granite laced with quartz vibrates. Under the right conditions, it could resonate like a tuning fork. Imagine lying on the floor, torch guttering, the air still warm from the day. You hum a single note, and the walls answer back. Musicians who have tested this space say the sound swells until it no longer feels external, but inside the body itself, a chamber meant to hold a king or to hold a frequency. And still, the question persists. The graffiti scrawled by workers, friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkora, tell us who hauled the ropes, but they do not tell us why they built resonant galleries or shafts angled with stars. Humour is carved into stone, purpose is not. The pyramid's silence feels deliberate. You turn toward the quieter chamber, the one long overlooked. Compared to the gallery's height, this room feels close. The walls are plain. The ceiling sits low. It would be easy to shrug and move on, until your light finds the narrow shafts, 2 openings no wider than a forearm slanting upward like hidden arteries. For years they were called vents, but they climb too steeply for breath and run so straight they look more intention than accident. Curiosity did what it always does. Engineers built a small crawler the size of a shoebox and sent it exploring. The wheels buzzed, the cable unspooled, and the camera nosed into a passage no human had seen since the blocks were set. It crawled for minutes that felt like hours. Then the screen showed a slab ahead. A plug of limestone fitted across the shaft. 2 copper pins winked from its face. Not a draft hole then. A door. The room behind you held its breath. The robot stopped. The pyramid did not elaborate. Years later, a pinhole was drilled and a lens pushed through. On the other side, a small space, and beyond that, another block. A door behind a door, a question behind a question, and then, permits expired, access narrowed, equipment packed. The unwelcome guest of 4,000 years was shown politely to the exit. Step back outside for air. At dawn, when the limestone skin warms evenly, infrared cameras read heat like a language. One morning the readings returned odd syllables, patches glowing hotter than their neighbours, blocks releasing warmth at different rates as if cavities lay beyond. The pattern clustered low, then scattered high. Instruments asked for a follow-up. Bureaucracy said later. The stones said nothing. The silence didn't last. A new team arrived with muon detectors, devices that listen to the rain of cosmic particles drifting through the planet. Stone slows that rain. Empty space lets more through. Map the flux, and the mass draws itself like a shadow. The plan was modest. Confirm what was known, sketch what was suspected. Instead, the numbers betrayed a shape that should not exist, an absence the size of a small aircraft floating above the Grand Gallery. 30 meters long, maybe more. Not a corridor, not a tidy room. A void where no void was expected. The monitors glowed. The lab fell quiet. Silence followed. Think of the drunkards of Mencor painting their joke in red before the block vanished into a wall. They signed their team. No one signed the void. Imagine watching the plot update in real time, dots to contours, contours to a hollow every map had missed. Your stomach drops. Your hand finds the table edge. Then the meeting ends, and the public statement speaks in careful tones. Anomaly, cavity, feature. The pyramid offered a reveal and then wrapped it in caution. Back in the chamber, the narrow shafts wait with their copper glints. The robot's wheels are silent now. In your head you rerun the climb. Stone brushing the housing, the faint whine of a motor, the neat door. You almost smile. A monument hoarding secrets like a cat showing a paw then tucking it back. Where are you listening from tonight? Hold that ordinary place in mind and set it for a moment beneath millions of tons of limestone. Picture a sealed doorway no one living has opened. Picture a shadow in stone that answers only to particles from space. There are explanations that satisfy the cautious, vents never meant for air, plugs that honour ritual, heat patches born of repair, a relieving space meant to spare the gallery below, sensible, each one, perhaps even right. And yet the rhythm continues. A shaft that ends with copper, a door that hides another door, heat where there should be none, a volume where none was drawn. The pyramid keeps handing you puzzles, and then asks for patience. Napoleon never wrote about the chambers in technical terms. He spoke around them, then fell quiet. You start to understand the instinct. Some places invite the tape measure, others suggest you listen. The graffiti tells us who pulled. The instruments tell us what is missing. Neither explains why the stone learned to keep a secret. Climb higher in imagination, beyond the Queen's chamber and its sealed shafts, and you enter the most restricted spaces of all. Above the King's chamber lies a stack of cramped rooms, hardly tall enough to crouch in, each capped with granite beams heavier than railway cars. Archaeologists call them relieving chambers, designed to spread weight and keep the chamber below from collapsing. On paper, it makes sense. Yet questions linger. Why use slabs so massive that modern cranes would groan to lift them? Why haul granite 600 miles from a swan when softer limestone was abundant here? Stand beneath those beams in thought. 50 tons apiece, balanced above your head. Stone that could crush you into the floor like chalk dust. And yet it hasn't shifted in 4 millennia. Their surfaces are veined with quartz, a crystal that does something strange when struck. It vibrates. Clap in the chamber below and the echo swells, a low growl that fills your chest. Some describe it as music, others as unease, a tomb that behaves like an amplifier. Engineers whisper about piezoelectric charge, about resonance feeding into something larger. Egyptologists counter, granite was sacred, eternal, chosen to protect a king. Both sides agree on one thing: the effect is real. Sound lingers here in a way unlike anywhere else in Egypt. Look outward for a moment. In Malta, the Hippogeum temple's carved stone chambers amplify voices until even a whisper feels like a chorus. In Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun shows traces of mica, a mineral that insulates and resists heat. Outside Xi'an in China, pyramids lie hidden beneath farmland, deliberately aligned with constellations but sealed from view. Around the world, stone and sky keep meeting in ways we do not yet fully untangle. Back in Giza, you stand inside the Grand Gallery again. Torchlight flickers. The floor grooves stretch before you like tracks. Niches bite into the walls. The design feels more mechanical than ritual. A corridor that behaves like an engine room. But no hieroglyphs explain its purpose. No inscription admits intent. The pyramid speaks in geometry and silence. Napoleon's pale face rises in memory. The general who spent a night here, leaving at dawn and refusing to speak of what he had seen. Perhaps it was nothing more than shadows and echoes. Or perhaps he felt what visitors still feel, resonance humming through bone, the unease of a chamber that acts alive, and the graffiti, friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkora, still waits in the shadows. Their jokes remind us this was human work, sweat and laughter pressed into stone. But their marks stop at the outer blocks. None appear on the beams above the king's chamber. No hand claimed the void. If you've ever leaned against a speaker when bass rattled through it, you know how vibration crawls into your chest. Now imagine millions of tons of granite tuned to a single note, a monument that hums, a silence that feels active. Where are you listening from tonight? And can you feel the faint echo even here, across time and distance? The relieving chambers, the resonant gallery, the shafts to stars, each might be explained alone. Weight relief, ritual airways, symbolic alignment, each plausible, each neat. But together they press harder until tomb theory begins to bend. So the puzzle grows, a monument that aligns with heaven, that hums when you raise your voice, that hides doors behind doors and spaces the size of an aircraft. If this was only a grave, why does it behave like a riddle? The stones keep their silence, and that silence is beginning to feel like part of the design. You step into the king's chamber again, torch in hand, and the first thing you notice is not what is present, but what is missing. No painted ceilings, no carved prayers, no figures of gods striding across the walls. Every other royal tomb in Egypt is crowded with voices, hymns, spells, star maps, and threats against thieves. Here, the stone is mute. It feels deliberate, this silence, as though the builders decided that words would only cheapen the structure. The granite does not explain itself. It waits. Imagine lying on the floor centuries ago, a pharaoh's body carried in torchlight, priests chanting, oils poured, and then the walls, refusing to echo back a single syllable. No painted jackals to guard the king, no written spells to guide him into the afterlife. Just blank granite that seems to insist, your rituals are smaller than me. This emptiness puzzled even ancient visitors. Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote of hidden tunnels and wooden machines used to lift the stones. He admitted his knowledge came from what the priests told me, but already the pyramid's silence was forcing outsiders to fill the void with speculation. Centuries later, silence gave rise to stories. Napoleon's legend stands out. He requested to spend a night alone in the pyramid. Guards waited outside. When dawn came, he stepped out pale and shaken. Asked what he had seen, he refused to speak. Decades later, on his deathbed, he began to tell a friend, then stopped himself with a whisper. "You would not believe me." The story spread. Some said he had a vision of his own death. Others whispered the chamber hummed at a pitch that unsettled even him. Still others joked he realized he was lying under 50 tons of granite and decided it was the most foolish night's lodging of his life. Whatever the truth, the silence of the chamber gave him no words, only a pale face and a refusal. And so legends grew, filling the quiet with noise. One tale insists a golden capstone once crowned the pyramid, stolen in antiquity or lost to time. Another claims the missing tip was deliberate, as though the monument was never finished, a circuit waiting for its last piece. In whispers, it becomes less tomb and more machine, paused in mid-build. The absence of inscriptions fuels more theories. Egyptologists point out that the Great Pyramid predates the ornate burials of the Valley of the Kings. Decoration came later, they say. Khufu's tomb was built before that tradition took hold. A tidy explanation, but still unsettling. Why lavish such precision on stone, then leave its surfaces blank? Step into another silence. Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. Archaeologists discovered tunnels beneath it lined with pools of liquid mercury, shimmering like rivers in the dark. Mercury, a metal that moves like water but reflects like glass, seems chosen less for ritual and more for effect. No inscriptions explained its purpose either. Silence echoed across continents. Imagine you're inside the king's chamber now, the air tight, the granite box looming empty. No words to tell you who it was for. Only the hum when you strike the wall. Where are you listening from tonight? A quiet bedroom, headphones soft in the dark. Picture instead lying in that chamber, silence pressing down heavier than the beams above. Would you trust it to hold you, or would you want to flee as Napoleon did? Silence can be a kind of language. Here it says, I do not need to explain myself. I am explanation enough. And that silence may be more haunting than any carved spell. Walk deeper into the chamber. At its centre sits the granite box. Too big to have been moved through the narrow passages, it must have been placed before the walls closed around it. Archaeologists call it a sarcophagus, meant to cradle a king. But no body was ever found inside. No lid survives. Its interior is rougher than its polished outside, as though unfinished. The emptiness invited stories. Some said the box was meant for Khufu's body, long since stolen. Others whispered it was never for a corpse at all. Chris Dunn, a machinist, once suggested it was not a coffin but a component, a resonator, part of a machine disguised as a tomb. Egyptologists roll their eyes, yet the box remains, heavy, mute, and bare. Place your palm on that granite in imagination. It's cool to the touch, smooth on the edges, rough inside, a coffin with no occupant, a container with no contents. It tells you nothing, and by doing so, it tells you everything. That purpose has been erased, or perhaps withheld. Legends multiplied. Some travellers swore the box hummed when struck. Others claimed it altered the mind, filling the chamber with strange impressions. A few even insisted it once held not a man, but a relic, knowledge, or power, stolen before history could record it. The absence of evidence only encouraged invention. Odd humour crept in too. Guides in the 19th century used to dare tourists to climb into the coffer. Some did, lying stiff and grinning while their friends laughed. A joke in stone. The pyramid, patient, did not correct them. Look again at what is missing. No hieroglyphs, no gods, no painted stars. The Valley of the Kings overflows with imagery, every wall smothered in instructions for the soul's journey. Khufu's great monument gives nothing. Perhaps decoration was unnecessary. Perhaps it was intentionally forbidden. Silence becomes its own guard. Outside parallels whisper the same. In China, the tomb mound of the first emperor remains sealed. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing inside, but archaeologists hesitate to open it, fearing damage. So it waits, its silence intact, while the soil above steams faintly with chemical traces. In Mexico, pools of mercury shone in the tunnels of Teotihuacan, never explained. Again, no inscriptions, only mysteries and metal. The pyramid's silence fits this pattern. Monuments that refuse to share their purpose, daring later ages to speculate, and yet against this hush, small voices break through. Remember the graffiti, friends of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaure. Their paint shouts across time in contrast to the mute granite. A beer ration was their payment, and perhaps their joke. Imagine them finishing a day's haul, scratching their crew name into stone, then downing jars of thick brew as the sun set. Their laughter survived where their king's words did not. The silence belongs to pharaohs. The noise belongs to labourers. Napoleon's pale silence, the coffer's emptiness, the absent hieroglyphs, the echoing voids found by modern scans, All of these pressed together into a rhythm, a structure that should explain but doesn't, a tomb that should tell but refuses. Imagine you're lying in that coffer. The granite is cold. Above you, beams weigh more than locomotives. Around you, not a single prayer is carved. No painted star promises your way to the heavens, only blank stone. Where are you listening from tonight? And could you stay here without words to comfort you? The silence begins to feel less like neglect and more like a choice. The pyramid's silence did not stop people from filling it with words of their own. For centuries, whispers circulated about secret rooms hidden behind the walls. Arab chroniclers in the Middle Ages spoke of chambers filled with treasures, even maps of the stars and strange objects of glass. In the 19th century, explorers drilled into the stones hoping to find hollow spaces. Most struck only solid limestone, but every so often a faint echo suggested there was more waiting inside. The myths multiplied. Some insisted the coffer was once filled not with a body, but with scrolls, the lost wisdom of Atlantis, sealed away before a flood. Others imagined machines, devices that harnessed the pyramid's shape. Still others thought of traps, poisons, or curses strong enough to keep intruders at bay. Silence gave birth to every possibility. And then there are the rumours of tunnels. Locals tell of underground passages stretching from Giza to the Nile, even all the way to the Sphinx. None have been proven, though scans occasionally show anomalies deep under the plateau. You can almost picture a worker, torch in hand, carrying beer jars down into a shaft that no modern eye has seen. The graffiti they left behind was playful, but their true pathways, hidden still. Napoleon's pale exit from the king's chamber remains the most famous legend, but it is not unique. Other visitors reported strange feelings, headaches, sudden nausea, even visions. Was it the air, the acoustics, or something stranger? Perhaps it was nothing more than nerves under so much weight, or perhaps the silence itself worked on them, pressing harder than the stone. Humour survived even here. Victorian tourists sometimes chipped away souvenirs, pocketing fragments of granite as if the pyramid were a quarry for trinkets. Guides rolled their eyes but joined the grift, selling chips of ordinary limestone as Pharaoh's relics. The pyramid endured their chisels in silence, outlasting both their greed and their jokes. Still, silence is not empty. It feels chosen. Egyptologists explain it as timing. Decoration came later, perfected in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. Khufu's tomb, they say, was early in the tradition. But if that is true, why is this monument so much more exact in its construction than the ones that followed? Why put so much into stone and nothing into words? Imagine you are one of the workers standing in the chamber after a long day's haul, sweat on your back, a beer ration waiting in the village below. You look around at the bare walls. Would you not ask why the king's great tomb is plainer than the simplest shrine? Would you scratch your name into the block just to leave a voice in the silence? The drunkards of Menkaure did, and perhaps in that act they answered the quiet with laughter. The pyramid's silence is both absence and presence. It leaves no instructions, yet it pulls endless stories toward itself. Priests whispering to Herodotus, chroniclers writing of treasure vaults, Napoleon refusing to speak, engineers today peering at voids with cosmic rays. And so you leave the chamber, the torch guttering as you step into the passage. The pyramid offers nothing, and yet it feels heavier for it. Every other tomb in Egypt explains itself in walls of ink and paint. This one insists you imagine. Where are you listening from tonight? A dark room, headphones soft, maybe with a drink at your side. Imagine instead standing in stone silence so absolute that your heartbeat becomes the only sound. Would you find comfort in it? Or would you hurry outside into the wind? Perhaps the silence itself was the secret. Not decoration, not inscription, just absence, chosen so that mystery would endure. Step outside for air. The desert wind feels sharp after the stale breath of the pyramid. The stone glows faintly in moonlight, and you remember the silence inside. Blank walls, mute granite, shafts angled to stars. Egyptologists tell you these are rituals. But some have looked at the same evidence and whispered something far bolder. What if it was never a tomb at all? Chris Dunn was one of them. Not an archaeologist, but a machinist. He had spent decades in factories studying vibration, resonance, precision cuts. When he stood inside the pyramid, he didn't see ritual, he saw engineering. To him, the gallery looked less like a passageway and more like a machine housing. The granite beams above the king's chamber resembled resonators. The coffer wasn't a coffin, but a component. Imagine walking with him, a tape measure in hand, a machinist's instinct whispering every time stone fits stone without error. To a scholar, silence might mean religion. To an engineer, silence can mean design. Dunn suggested the pyramid was built to generate energy. Not the glowing sci-fi beams you'd see in a film, but power drawn from vibration, chemistry, and resonance. He pointed to the granite itself, laced with quartz, capable of vibrating under stress. He looked at the gallery, its corbelled ceiling rising like a throat, and imagined hydrogen gas filling it, resonating until it hummed. Mainstream scholars dismissed it. They argued that calling the pyramid a power plant was fantasy, ignoring evidence that it was simply a tomb. But Dunn countered with the silence. No text inside, no clear religious story, no body found. A tomb should speak. This one did not. Theories multiplied from his seed. Some speculated water from the Nile seeped into the bedrock, rising into the pyramid through tunnels. Combined with chemicals stored in the Queen's chamber, it might have produced hydrogen. That gas funneled into the King's chamber could have been stimulated by vibration, turning the whole pyramid into a giant resonator. An ancient machine that hummed with energy. It sounds wild. Egyptologists shake their heads, but pause and picture it. Millions of tons of stone, cut and placed with tolerances finer than most modern construction. Shafts angled with stars as if tuned to the heavens. Granite beams that sing when you clap. A coffer that hums when struck. Dunn simply asked, what if these weren't accidents? What if they were features? Humour slips in here. When Dunn published his book, some critics joked he was turning Khufu's tomb into the world's first industrial plant. One reviewer quipped, "What next? A steam engine under the Sphinx?" Dunn smiled and kept measuring. For him, the pyramid looked less like a church, more like a factory. Remember the graffiti, the drunkards of Menkora, their laughter etched into stone. They hauled blocks, drank their beer, scratched their names. They knew they were part of something vast, but they probably never guessed it might be seen one day not as a tomb, but as a power machine. Beer belonged to them. Silence, perhaps, belonged to the king, or to something stranger. Imagine standing in the king's chamber with Dunn. He hums a low note, and the walls carry it until your ribs buzz. He taps the coffer, and the granite sings back. He squints, not as a tourist, but as an engineer who recognizes when material is behaving like a tuned part. Where are you listening from tonight? Could you trust your own senses if the stone itself seemed to behave like machinery? Egyptologists scoffed, but his questions stuck. The pyramid's silence felt deliberate, and sometimes silence hides design. Imagine starting in the lowest passages deep beneath the pyramid. The so-called subterranean chamber is hacked roughly into bedrock, its floor uneven, its air stale. Egyptologists call it unfinished, abandoned when plans changed. But Dunn wondered if it was not a mistake, but a foundation. To him, the roughness wasn't failure, it was plumbing. A place where water from the Nile could seep through the bedrock and rise into the structure. Water became his first ingredient. The second came from the Queen's chamber. Here, archaeologists once found traces of chemical residue in the walls. To most, it meant nothing. To Dunn, it hinted at stored materials. acids and bases that when mixed could produce hydrogen gas. Imagine that gas rising, filling the Grand Gallery like invisible smoke. A tomb does not need hydrogen, a machine might. Now climb again into the king's chamber. Its granite beams overhead, veined with quartz, hum when struck. The whole room resonates like a drum. Dunn proposed that the vibrations, from Earth itself or from sound, energize the hydrogen, turning the chamber into a resonator, maybe even a kind of maser, a forerunner of the laser. Energy, not ritual. Physics, not prayer. Egyptologists bristled. They argued there was no solid evidence of chemical mixing chambers, no copper pipes, no inscriptions of machines. To them, the residues could be explained by later contamination. The shafts were star alignments, nothing more. Granite beams were structural, not musical. And yet, even they admitted, the chamber resonates. You can feel it in your chest. Picture yourself standing inside as an engineer claps his hands. The note blooms and lingers. You breathe out, and even your breath seems to vibrate. Imagine if the entire room was once filled with gas, each molecule trembling in time. Where are you listening from tonight? Could you keep your calm if the walls themselves seemed to sing? Modern experiments have tried to chase the idea. Researchers tested granite blocks cut with the same proportions as the chamber. Struck with sound waves, they rang at frequencies close to what Dunn suggested. Engineers hummed and the stone answered. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps not. Humour drifted in with critics. One archaeologist quipped that Dunn had simply reinvented the world's largest musical instrument, a cathedral organ without pipes. Another joked that the power plant theory could explain why beer was rationed so heavily. Perhaps workers needed to hydrate for all that hydrogen. The joke stuck, but so did the unease. If the design was only symbolic, why does it behave so stubbornly like a machine? Remember the graffiti. Men calling themselves friends of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaure. They pulled stone, drank their beer, laughed at their lot. They signed their marks. Yet none explained the silence of the chambers above them. Their humour survived. The king's intent did not. Egyptologists remind us that speculation is easy when gaps remain. A blank wall becomes a canvas for imagination. They point out that we have no tools, no copper fittings, no texts describing energy. Without those, they argue, the pyramid remains a tomb, however strange. But Dunn's response was simple. Machines do not need labels. No one carves instructions onto a turbine blade. A design explains itself through function, not inscription. And the pyramid, he argued, behaves too much like a design to be an accident. So the question lingers. A tomb that hums like an engine, shafts that act less like vents and more like waveguides. Residues hinting at chemistry. Silence where every other tomb screams with decoration. The pieces do not prove the machine, but they do not erase it either. The king's chamber still hums in your mind as you step back into night air. The desert cools, but the thought lingers. What if the pyramid once sang? Engineers who tested the chamber's dimensions found its ratios eerily close to harmonic frequencies. Strike the granite, and sound does not vanish, it multiplies. The gallery outside seems less corridor, more tuning chamber, focusing vibrations upward into the resonant box of granite above. To Dunn, it was no accident. He described the pyramid as a power plant, not in the modern sense of turbines and wires, but as a vast harmonic machine. Water seeping from the Nile became fuel. Chemical residues hinted at reactions that made hydrogen. The granite chamber turned that gas into a resonator. The pyramid, he said, may have once radiated energy the way a tuning fork radiates sound. Critics counter that the theory is thin, stitched from speculation and absence. There is no surviving pipework, no clear record, no tool marks consistent with the generator. They argue that it is pseudoscience wrapped in ore, and yet even they admit the facts are stubborn. The chamber resonates, The alignments are exact. The voids exist. Silence is not proof, but neither is it dismissal. Imagine you're standing inside with Dunn himself. He hums low, and the walls answer. He runs his palm across the granite coffer, smooth on the outside, rough within, and says, "This isn't a coffin, it's a component." You hesitate, caught between archaeologist and machinist, between tomb and machine. Where are you listening from tonight? And which version would you believe if the stone itself seemed to choose both? The speculation reaches further. Some drew parallels to Nikola Tesla, who believed the Earth itself could be tapped as an energy source through resonance. Tesla built his Wardenclyffe Tower in New York in the early 1900s, a skeletal giant meant to transmit wireless power across continents. Newspapers mocked it. Financiers abandoned him. The tower was dismantled. But his dream, energy drawn from vibration, from the rhythms of earth and sky, echoes Dunn's vision of the pyramid. Two monuments, thousands of years apart, both seen as machines by their makers, both left unfinished or dismantled by time. Humour slips in here too. Critics joked that Dunn had simply built the world's most elaborate what-if. Egyptologists muttered that if pyramids were power plants, their efficiency was terrible. No light bulbs, no motors, no grid. Dunn replied that absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. Perhaps the energy was not electrical at all, but something we no longer measure or no longer know how to use. Remember the beer rations, the laughter scratched into stone by the drunkards of Menkaure. To them, the pyramid was sweat and jokes, bread and beer. They could not have imagined Tesla's towers or Dunn's theories, and yet their blocks became the puzzle on which such theories feed. Beer kept them alive. Silence keeps us speculating. The graffiti remains the most human mark, men with sore shoulders carving their pride into limestone. But above their scratches, shafts still climb to stars, chambers still hum, and voids still hide. Tomb or machine, the pyramid holds two truths at once: human laughter and mechanical silence. Imagine Tesla standing here beside Dunn. Both tilt their heads to the granite walls. Both listen. Both whisper that resonance can power the world. The archaeologist at your other shoulder scoffs, but the hum does not vanish. It waits, long after the arguments fade, and so the chapter closes on a choice. Was the pyramid a tomb, a monument, or a machine that once vibrated with power? The stones give no answer, but across oceans and centuries, other pyramids rise, in Mexico, in China, in Sudan, each with their own silence, their own oddities. If one machine could hum in Egypt, might others have once sung elsewhere? Inside the king's chamber, silence doesn't behave. You clear your throat, expecting stillness. Instead, the sound swells, refusing to die, crawling back into your chest until it feels like the granite itself is breathing with you. You hum softly, just a thread of sound. The walls take it, magnify it, and send it back until your ribs buzz as though stone has borrowed your breath. It feels personal, intimate, a conversation between body and monument. A tomb should be mute. This one insists on speaking. In the 1990s, researchers tested it with tone generators and microphones. They discovered distinct harmonic frequencies, pitches that triggered the granite to amplify instead of absorb. At those notes, instruments shook. Voices blurred into chords and dust trembled loose from joints. One engineer admitted the effect made him uneasy, though in his report he called it coincidence. His notes betray the hesitation, respect dressed as dismissal. Egyptologists echo the caution. Large rooms echo, they remind us. Granite resonates. One added that the chamber felt overbuilt, a word that slipped past scholarly reserve. Overbuilt implies intent, as though someone designed it for stresses we don't understand. To machinists and musicians, the numbers feel deliberate. The chamber's proportions align almost perfectly with harmonic ratios. Singers performing inside describe their voices multiplying beyond natural reach. notes pluming unnaturally as if the chamber itself joins in. Some visitors leave dizzy, as if the resonance slips past the ears and presses directly on the nervous system. Imagine the ancient crews hearing this effect, men hauling ropes, sweat running, overseers barking orders. They shout to keep rhythm and hear their own voices return doubled, louder than before. Work songs swelling until the gallery itself seems to chant along. Later, in the workers' village, beer jars clink together like percussion, laughter chasing echoes into the night. The drunkards of Menkaure would have roared at the thought that the pyramid was their rowdiest chorus. And across the world, other monuments join the song. In Mexico, at the base of Kukulcan's pyramid, clap your hands and the echo returns not as noise, but as a bird call, the cry of the sacred Quetzal. Tourists laugh and clap again, turning a temple into a concert hall. Guides roll their eyes, but the stones do not stop singing. The comparison is irresistible. In both Mexico and Egypt, stone catches human noise and reshapes it into something uncanny. Coincidence, say the cautious. Evidence of design, whisper the dreamers. Back inside the king's chamber, you rest your hand against the granite. It's cool, almost damp with the weight of centuries, but faintly alive under your skin, vibrating with the breath of your own hum. Coincidence or not, the sensation is real, and when you step out again into the narrow corridors, silence itself feels different. Ordinary quiet now carries memory, as though the stone still hums long after the sound is gone. Step into the grand gallery. It soars upward like a stone throat, steep and narrow, its corbelled walls tiered toward the ceiling. The acoustics here are stranger still. Whistles sharpen to a knife edge, footsteps become drum beats, and voices multiply until the passage seems to sing with you. It does not swallow noise, it joins it. Now picture the labourers, dozens straining at ropes, moving blocks the weight of elephants. They chant to hold rhythm, voices rough with dust and beer. But the sound doesn't fade. The walls return it doubled, louder, stronger, as if the pyramid itself has entered the chorus. Songs that began as survival chants grow into a roar, a sound larger than the men who made it. Beer thick as porridge kept their bodies moving, but resonance magnified their presence into something greater than flesh. Their names, friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure, painted in red, remain proof that pride and humour clung to every block. Imagine those names shouted, echoed, answered, until laughter and stone became indistinguishable. Chris Dunn saw more than echoes. To him, the gallery was not a hallway but a resonant amplifier, a place designed to focus sound into the chamber above. Granite threaded with quartz can vibrate under pressure, converting mechanical energy into charge. Add hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, and resonance could become fuel. No hieroglyphs speak of it, no wires remain, yet the geometry itself seems to encourage the thought. Egyptologists resist, yet sometimes their own language betrays them. One archaeologist muttered that the gallery felt overbuilt, as though designed for stresses unseen. Another admitted the resonance unsettled him, though he would only call it acoustics. Respect and denial mingle in their voices, never fully able to erase the sense of design. Others turn to parallels. Nikola Tesla, in his New York laboratory, once built a machine no larger than a fist, a mechanical oscillator. He attached it to a steel frame and let it run. Neighbours swore their walls shook as if an earthquake had arrived. Police stormed the building, ready to evacuate the block. Tesla, grinning, yanked the device loose just before beams cracked. Later he told reporters, "Had I not stopped, I could have brought the whole block down." Imagine him here, in the grand gallery, tuning fork in hand, hearing the pyramid answer. Global echoes stretch wider. In Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple, carved T-pillars were placed in circles that shaped sound in unusual ways. Voices carried differently there than in open fields, as though the arrangement was tuned for gatherings. Some archaeologists suggest its pillars were not only symbolic, but acoustic instruments shaping ritual itself. From Göbekli to Giza, stone reshaped sound before writing was born. Back in the gallery, grooves run along the floor, niches bite into the walls. They might have held beams for moving stone, or perhaps fittings for something we no longer recognise. To an engineer, they look like remnants of a machine. To an archaeologist, only scaffolding. The debate hums louder than the stones themselves, and still the workers' chants echo. Songs bouncing, laughter magnified, names painted on blocks to outlast the flesh that carved them. Beer kept the rhythm alive, but resonance made their voices thunder. What was once noise became something stranger, something communal, something that still refuses to fade. When the chants stop, the gallery lingers on the sound, reluctant to give it back. Silence feels like an afterthought here, not the rule. Modern tests push the mystery further. Engineers set up tone generators inside the king's chamber, sweeping across frequencies to watch how the stone responded. At certain notes, the granite caught the sound and refused to release it. The air vibrated until microphones shook, and fine dust lifted from the floor as though gravity itself had loosened. Visitors described their balance tipping, their vision shimmering, as if the resonance were tampering not only with stone but with perception. This is where the hum turns uncanny. It is no longer just a sound you hear or feel in your chest. It begins to rewrite the space around you, shifting how your body interprets silence, how your mind trusts its own senses. Skeptics have their say here too, though the tone changes again. One archaeologist admitted, "Uncanny, yes," but waved it away as nothing more than physics. Another, less guarded, muttered that the whole structure felt built for stresses we still don't understand. Then came the humour. If this was a power plant, it's the worst in history. 4,000 years, and not a single lamp lit. Their quips earn laughter at conferences, but even their jokes betray unease. When stone rattles instruments and unsettles balance, comedy becomes a shield. Dunn's vision of the pyramid as a machine leaned heavily on resonance like this. To him, hydrogen gas filling the chamber could have been energized into standing waves, turning the pyramid into a massive transducer. Some speculated further that the shafts acted like conduits, channeling energy outward, tuned to the stars themselves. Egyptologists call it fantasy. But the resonance remains, stubborn as stone. Other places echo the same strangeness. In Malta's hypogeum, a whisper can bloom until it becomes a chorus. Archaeologists measured how certain low frequencies alter human brainwaves. Listeners describe drifting into trance, their sense of time bending, their perception of self dissolving under sound. It was not just the air that changed, but the mind itself. From Malta to Giza, resonance refuses to stay simple, and the human thread endures. Imagine the drunkards of Menkaure after a day's labour, staggering with laughter, beer jars clutched in their hands. Their noise filled the galleries, songs bouncing until the stone answered them. Their graffiti scratched across blocks remains their voice. Beer left noise, graffiti left names, but the king left silence. Between them, the pyramid still hums. That contrast lingers as the truest refrain. Human voices fed by beer and pride were amplified until they became something greater. But in the king's chamber, the pharaoh left nothing but stone and resonance. The living filled the pyramid with laughter. The dead filled it with silence. Both still echo, one in paint, the other in hum. Step outside. Night has fallen over the plateau and the desert is quiet, but quiet feels changed. Once you've felt dust rise on a tone, once you've heard stone throw sound back harder than you gave it, silence no longer feels simple. It carries memory, like a vibration that never stopped. You walk across the plateau, and though the air is still, you swear the hum follows in your bones. Step away from the stone corridors and into another setting entirely. Picture a lecture hall, Lights dimmed, slides clicking forward one by one, the air dry with dust and chalk. Here the pyramid is not a riddle wrapped in desert silence, but a tidy diagram. Angles are drawn, shafts are labelled. Cross-sections glow on the projector screen. The scholars stand at the podium with notes in hand, confident that every anomaly is simply a problem already solved. Every feature has a practical explanation, one lecturer begins. He taps the slide. The narrow shafts, symbolic passages for the king's soul to reach Orion. The stacked granite beams above the king's chamber, merely weight relief, the same principle that lets cathedrals survive the centuries. The strange echoes of the chamber, nothing more than acoustics, the same phenomenon that makes a whisper carry in a dome. Even the great void revealed by particle scans, a structural cavity, empty space to lighten the mass. Function follows necessity. Mystery, he insists, is a mirage. The students in the hall scribble notes. The rhythm of academic certainty is persuasive, its tone steady. Yet even within this confidence, hesitation sometimes leaks through. One archaeologist once conceded during a Q&A, coincidence of course, though I admit it unsettles me when I hear it. The words deny, but the voice betrays unease. Critics know too well how silence invites invention. Speculation thrives on a blank wall, one historian quipped, and Khufu left more blank wall than anyone. For the skeptic, this is restraint, not conspiracy. Where the dreamer hears humming stone, the academic hears nothing more than absence. Even Napoleon's famous night in the king's chamber is reframed in this setting. In the dreamer's telling, he emerged pale, shaken, refusing to speak. To critics, the story is less spectral and more theatrical. Napoleon, they remind us, was a master of stagecraft. His silence may have been no ghostly encounter but performance, a wordless anecdote crafted to outlive him. What unsettles, they argue, is not what he saw, but why he used silence as spectacle. And then the workers' voices re-enter, but not only through their graffiti. Excavations of the workers' cemetery near the pyramid have revealed skeletons worn by labour, knees ground down, spines compressed by years of hauling. Yet many show healed fractures, proof that the injured were treated and allowed to return. These were not disposable slaves, but people whose labour bound them into community. The red-painted names carved on blocks, friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure, were pride, even humour. Their bones are proof of endurance, their graffiti proof of belonging. Beer fueled their days, yes, but bones tell the deeper story. One skeleton shows a man who had broken his leg badly, healed poorly, and yet lived long afterward, which means others must have carried his share of work until he could return. The graffiti is laughter on stone. The graveyard is testimony carved in bone. Together they argue that the pyramid's true story is human persistence. The lecture resumes. Another professor clears his throat and reads from notes. The pyramid's mystery is not technology. Its mystery is labour. He closes his binder with finality. The hall claps politely. The diagrams on the screen show shafts, beams, corridors, all labelled and explained. It looks tidy, almost soothing in its certainty. Yet when you step back outside, when you trade the lecture's fluorescent hum for the desert wind, the diagrams feel less convincing. Paper explanations flatten complexity into neat lines, but the pyramid, in its silence, refuses to be folded into the margins. The hum remains, whether dismissed or not. On campus, the story closes with citations. On the plateau, stone keeps its own counsel. The lecture hall's certainty softens once you leave the slides behind. On the plateau itself, where the blocks still radiate the day's heat, even skeptics sometimes falter. They trail their hands along granite smoothed to impossible tolerances. They measure the base, note the corners aligned almost perfectly across 13 acres, and grow quiet. At last, a mutter slips out. Overbuilt. It is not a confession, but it is not dismissal either. The word betrays reluctant respect, admiration they never meant to grant. One archaeologist admitted privately that the precision was harder to dismiss than to explain. He still called the pyramid a tomb, but his voice carried the tone of someone wrestling with a puzzle rather than closing a case. Even critics standing inside those chambers sometimes sound like men listening to something they cannot quite silence. History too weighs on their caution. For centuries, Troy was nothing but poetry, a city sung into memory by Homer. Scholars laughed at the very idea that it had ever existed. When Heinrich Schliemann announced he would dig for it, colleagues scoffed. Yet in 1871, his spade uncovered massive stone walls, gates and towers. Beneath layers of earth lay the ruins of a city thought to be legend. Myth had carried truth, while scholarship had mocked. The Antikythera mechanism tells the same story in bronze. In 1901, divers off a Greek island hauled up corroded lumps from a Roman shipwreck. One piece was dismissed as nothing more than barnacled debris. But decades later, X-rays revealed gears, dozens of them, interlocking with breathtaking precision. It was no scrap. It was a machine, an astronomical computer capable of predicting eclipses, charting planetary cycles, and tracking the Metonic calendar. Scholars who once dismissed it as junk were forced to admit it rewrote the history of Greek engineering. What had been laughed at as nonsense turned out to be genius buried in silence. Skeptics know these stories. They cite them cautiously, warning that anomalies don't overturn established knowledge. One city does not rewrite every myth, a professor insists. One machine does not make the Greeks into modern engineers. Their caution is fair. Yet privately, some admit a lingering thought. If Troy and Antikythera could wait under soil and sea, what still waits in the chambers of Giza? And the workers' voices once again resist neat dismissal. This time they reappear not through jokes but through pride. Their graffiti was not random scribble. It was team identity, like banners carried into battle. Friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure. These names declared ownership of the work. Bread and beer sustained their bodies, but pride carved in red paint sustained their spirits. Imagine them in the galleries chanting their crew names into the darkness, the stone throwing their voices back louder than before. It was not just labour, it was belonging. Archaeologists point to this as proof of the human story, that the pyramid's grandeur is explained not by lost technology, but by organisation, loyalty, and shared identity. They emphasise community over conspiracy, and yet when they stand in the Grand Gallery, many still find themselves whispering. The acoustics answer louder than expected. Even if they call it overbuilt, the unease lingers. One scholar summed it up more carefully than his peers. If nothing else, the pyramid proves that human ambition builds past need. It is not merely a tomb, it is excess made stone. It was meant as dismissal of fringe theories, but the phrasing cut both ways. Excess leaves questions. Excess is not easily explained. History punishes overconfidence. It has before. That knowledge haunts the skeptics as much as the dreamers. Perhaps they're right. The pyramid is only a tomb, and every anomaly is illusion. But perhaps their own examples, Troy's buried walls, Antikythera's hidden gears, whisper otherwise. Silence hides many things. Sometimes it hides more than we are prepared to admit. By now, the skeptics know their place in the debate. They have endured decades of questions about aliens, machines, lost civilizations, and somewhere along the way their rebuttals grew teeth of humour. Not mockery for its own sake, but the kind of gallows wit that builds after too many late nights defending the same arguments. If this was a power plant, one Egyptologist told a crowd, it's the worst in history. 4,000 years and not a single receipt, not a single repair log, not even a lamp to show for it. Another joked, if we allow pyramids as machines, then Stonehenge will be called a satellite dish, and every stone circle in Britain will sprout conspiracies overnight. The lines earned laughter, and perhaps that was the point. Humour shields against the gnawing weight of unanswered questions. Yet even these wry dismissals can't erase unease. Many skeptics admit, though only in private, that standing inside the king's chamber unsettles them. They still hear the hum in their ribs, still see the uncanny alignments, still wonder at tolerances so exact they are easier to admire than to explain. Laughter buys relief, but laughter doesn't erase stone. The global echoes add their own pressure. At Stonehenge, acousticians set up speakers and instruments inside the circle of trilithons. To their surprise, sound carried strangely. Voices amplified, instruments projected farther, creating an enclosed sound field, unlike the open plain outside. Ritual, yes. Astronomy, yes. But also acoustics shaping the experience. If England's megaliths were tuned for sound as much as sky, why not Giza? And if Stonehenge, built by communities far less centralised than Egypt's, could hold such acoustic secrets, how much more might Khufu's architects have understood? Skeptics sigh at such comparisons. Rituals always sound dramatic in stone, one says. That doesn't make them machines. Their irritation feels rehearsed, but the echoes remain. Too many monuments across too many landscapes carry voices farther than they should. And then there are the workers, not reduced to beer rations this time, but seen in the ground itself. Archaeologists have unearthed skeletons near the plateau, and they tell stories just as loudly as graffiti. Worn knees, vertebrae ground flat, shoulders deformed by decades of hauling blocks. Yet there are also healed fractures, bones that broke and knit again, proof of care. Workers who had been injured were not discarded, but tended, fed, allowed to recover before returning to labour. Their endurance becomes its own monument. Imagine one of them, a man with a shattered tibia, healed, crooked but strong. He limps, but he lifts. He carves his name with red paint, not to boast, but to prove. I was here. I endured. His life is the counter-argument to fantasies of lost science. Human bone, healed and buried, insist that the pyramid is sweat, survival, and stubborn pride. The skeptics lean on this evidence. We have bones, graffiti, tools, ramps, quarries, they argue. We do not have machines. The pyramid is the sum of labour, not mystery. It is a persuasive case, built not on romance but on marrow. And yet, the silence persists. The shafts remain aligned too neatly. The gallery resonates too precisely. The void discovered by Mun scans refuses easy dismissal. The jokes keep audiences entertained, but none close the case. So the debate staggers on. Dreamers see a machine. Skeptics see a tomb. Both stand at the same plateau, looking at the same blocks, listening to the same echoes. Neither can claim full victory because the stone itself refuses to speak. Stand at the pyramid's base once more. Tourists mill around, guides wave flags, buses rumble. The arguments from lecture halls and conference panels still echo, sharp with humour or heavy with caution. Yet the pyramid waits, indifferent to both. Its stones carry heat, its shadows deepen. The workers who raised it are dust. The kings who claimed it are long gone. The skeptics and dreamers who argue now will fade too. What outlasts them all is stone. Stones that refuse to confirm or deny. Stones that hum but do not explain. Stones that listen longer than any theory. And beyond Egypt, other pyramids rise under jungles, deserts and farmland. Teotihuacan, Sian, Nubia. Each carries its own silence, its own chorus. Together they form not a single tomb or single machine, but a pattern too persistent to ignore. The skeptics close their books with jokes. The dreamers open theirs with questions. Between them stands the plateau, silent, waiting, outlasting them both. The desert does not end at Giza. If you turn west in imagination, cross oceans and wait centuries, stone rises again in another place, under another sun. The Valley of Mexico stretches before you, wide and high, the air thinner here, the horizon ringed with mountains. Down its centre runs a long straight road the Spaniards later called the Avenue of the Dead. At its heart, one of the largest pyramids ever built by human hands towers upward, the Pyramid of the Sun. Stand before it at dawn. Mist still lingers, the smell of smoke from morning fires curls into the air, and the pyramid looms not like a ruin, but like a smouldering ember. Archaeologists believe its surface was once coated in red plaster, glowing against the sky. Imagine thousands approaching from the avenue, drums sounding, incense burning, the red mountain above them alive with firelight. Unlike the Great Pyramid, which hides itself in silence, this one announced itself in colour, flame, and procession. Teotihuacan was no village. At its height, over 100,000 people lived here. The avenues bustled with merchants carrying obsidian blades, turquoise ornaments, cacao, and feathers. Murals painted on plastered walls showed gods with wide eyes, storm serpents curling through clouds, jaguars devouring hearts. The pyramids anchored it all. The Pyramid of the Sun, the smaller Pyramid of the Moon, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, all aligned to celestial events, all rising from the earth like mountains made of geometry. Yet beneath the grandeur, strangeness lingers. Archaeologists have found tunnels running under the pyramids. Some were sealed deliberately, as if to protect whatever lay inside. In 2015, excavations beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent revealed something almost surreal. Pools of liquid mercury. The metal shimmered like water, reflecting torchlight in dark chambers. Alongside it were pyrite crystals arranged like stars, glittering even in the shadows. What did this mean? Mercury is toxic, unstable, dangerous. No one would store it casually. Some believe it represented rivers of the underworld, a shining map of the mythic landscape. Others suggest it was ritual theatre, meant to impress or terrify initiates. Whatever the case, it transformed the dark tunnels into something alive, a mirror world flowing beneath the stone mountain. Where Giza hides a silent void, Teotihuacan buried rivers that glowed. The echoes of Giza return in this contrast. In Egypt, shafts cut toward Orion, and chambers hold their silence, daring speculation. In Mexico, tunnels glitter with mercury, daring the imagination in another way. Both bury secrets not on the surface but beneath, as if pyramids were always as much about what they concealed as what they displayed. The people of Teotihuacan vanished long before the Spanish arrived. By the time the Aztecs stumbled on the ruins centuries later, the city was already abandoned. They gave it the name we use now, Teotihuacan, the place where gods were made. The Aztecs believed the pyramids were built before their time, before their memory. To them, the Pyramid of the Sun was where the gods gathered to sacrifice themselves and restart the world after the last age collapsed. The Avenue of the Dead was where rulers and warriors walked to be remade. Even for the Aztecs, the pyramids were already myth. Oddities pile higher the longer you look. The Pyramid of the Sun's base is nearly identical in size to the Great Pyramid of Giza's. Both stand about 750 feet on each side, though one rises from desert sand and the other from volcanic soil. Both align with celestial bodies. Khufu's to Orion and Sirius, Teotihuacan's to the setting sun on specific dates. Did coincidence shape these mountains of stone, or was geometry a memory cultures carried unconsciously across the world? There are other whispers too. Some researchers note that Teotihuacan's street grid aligns at about 15.5 degrees east of true north, the same offset that appears in parts of Giza's complex. Others suggest that the Avenue of the Dead mirrors the Milky Way, with the Pyramid of the Sun and Moon aligned to stars. As in Egypt, the sky was folded into stone, and still, mysteries resist neat closure. In the tunnels under the Pyramid of the Sun, archaeologists found traces of offerings, jaguar bones, obsidian blades, and clay figurines, as though the city fed its monuments in ritual hunger. In one chamber, the walls sparkled with mica, a mineral not native to the valley but carried from mountains far away. Mica resists heat and electricity. Why place it here, under stone? Some say it was only decoration. Others wonder if it carried meaning lost to us. Another material chosen not for beauty, but because it did something, the way mercury shimmers like a river alive. The skeptics argue that all of this was religion, ritual, nothing more, that the pools of mercury symbolised nothing beyond myth. The maker glittered only for ceremony. Perhaps they are right, but when you stand at the base of the Pyramid of the Sun, when you climb its steep stairs and look down the Avenue of the Dead, the scale itself unsettles. Why build so large, so precise, so enduring, if only to mimic mountains already surrounding the valley? Why bury rivers of liquid metal beneath it, where no eye could see? Step back in imagination. The avenue stretches like a spine. The Pyramid of the Sun looms red and vast. The Pyramid of the Moon waits at the far end, aligned with the mountains behind it. Below, mercury flows in darkness. Above, stars blaze. Between them, stone binds sky and underworld. Perhaps the same question that lingers in Egypt lingers here too. These were not only tombs, they were not only temples, they were instruments built from stone, tuned to sky, earth, and mystery. And so the echo grows. Egypt built in silence, Mexico built in fire and mercury. Both raised mountains to touch the heavens, and both buried secrets below. Different continents, different centuries, yet the same refrain. Humans lifted stone to speak with gods, and left us puzzles instead. Shift your gaze south from Giza, past the cataracts of the Nile, until the river widens again through desert plains. Here the sand rises into low hills, and scattered across them are dozens of sharp-angled pyramids. Smaller than Khufu's, steeper in slope, they cluster together in groups, silhouettes like broken teeth against the horizon. This is Nubia, the land of Kush, and for nearly 1,000 years after Egypt's Pyramid Age had ended, Nubians were still building them. At Meroe, the royal city, more than 40 pyramids stand in view at once. Walk among them at sunrise and the desert air feels cooler, almost soft. The pyramids here rise only a fraction of Giza's height, but their angles are so steep they seem like daggers pointed upward. Many were once topped with capstones of shining stone or metal, now long gone. They mark the tombs of kings and queens, but also show a stubborn inheritance. Long after Egypt abandoned the pyramid form, Nubia carried it forward, reshaping it into its own style. The story of their rediscovery is less noble. In the 1830s, an Italian adventurer named Giuseppe Fellini arrived in Meroe. He came not with reverence, but with dynamite. Convinced the pyramids held treasures, he blasted the tops off several, reducing them to jagged ruins. Incredibly, he found a hoard of gold jewellery in one. But when he tried to sell the pieces in Europe, he was mocked. Scholars refused to believe such sophistication could come from Africa. Museums turned him away. The treasure eventually found a home in Munich, but the pyramids remained scarred by the blasts, mute witnesses to arrogance. This too is part of the pattern. Outsiders misjudging, assuming silence equals absence. Just as Troy was dismissed as myth, until walls rose from the dirt, just as the Antikythera mechanism was waved off as scrap until X-rays revealed gears, so too were Nubia's pyramids dismissed because they did not fit Europe's expectations. The silence of the desert became a snare, trapping truth in prejudice. The Nubians were not only imitators of Egypt, their pyramids often contained offering tables, chapels, and steep stairways. Reliefs carved inside show rulers embraced by gods, the afterlife depicted in motifs both Egyptian and uniquely Kushite. One queen, Amani Tora, was buried here with regalia that rivaled any pharaoh's. These pyramids were not pale echoes of Giza, they were continuations, evolutions, voices added to the chorus. Cross now in imagination from Africa to Asia, to another land of buried kings. In central China, outside the modern city of Xi'an, fields of wheat and villages spread across plains. Beneath them lie hundreds of earthen mounds, many of them vast and unexplored. The greatest of these is the tomb of Chincha Huang, the first emperor of China, the man who unified the warring states and built the first Great Wall. From above, his tomb is a massive pyramid-shaped mound, over 200 feet high, covered in trees and grass. But the true wonder lies inside, and almost none of it has been touched. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing through the chambers, laid out as a map of the empire. The ceiling, they say, was studded with jewels to mimic the stars. The emperor lies in the centre, guarded by traps, surrounded by riches meant to carry his rule into eternity. When modern scientists tested the soil around the mound, they found something startling. Mercury levels dozens of times higher than background. The old chronicles may not be myth after all. But still, the Chinese government has forbidden excavation, fearing damage to whatever fragile wonders remain. For now, the tomb endures as a silent mountain, waiting. The terracotta warriors that guard it, thousands of life-size soldiers, each with a unique face, are only an outlying fragment of the tomb complex. If the outer armies are this elaborate, what lies in the sealed core? Engineers debate how to excavate safely, how to protect the supposed mercury rivers. Until then, the pyramid mound of Teotihuacan resists curiosity with silence as stubborn as Giza's. Here again the echoes converge. In Egypt, shafts point to stars. In Mexico, tunnels flow with mercury. In China, an emperor's resting place may still contain rivers of the same shining element, sealed for over 2,000 years. Mercury as underworld river, Mercury as empire map. The same material chosen in two different worlds. Coincidence, or a memory carried by myth across cultures? Skeptics answer with caution. Mercury, they say, was a known substance, valued in many cultures. Its use in China and Mexico alike proves nothing more than human imagination repeating familiar motifs. Perhaps they are right, yet the repetition unsettles. Why should rivers of shimmering metal appear in the myths of civilizations separated by oceans? Why should so many pyramids, from Nubia to China, align themselves with sky, or bury secrets underground? The silence of Meroe is different from the silence of Xi'an. One is marked by scars of dynamite, the other by deliberate restraint. One shows the arrogance of outsiders, the other the caution of preservation. Yet both remain half-voiced. Their stones and mounds stand in plain sight, but their full stories are still withheld. Step back from both deserts, African and Asian. Imagine them side by side, the jagged ruins of Meroe, sunlight striking sharp angles, the green mound of Xi'an concealing treasures beneath its roots. Both rise from earth as pyramids, both carry whispers of lost truths, and both remind us that silence can mean different things. Silence can be destruction when arrogance blows away answers. Silence can be protection when patience holds them safe for the future. In the end, pyramids endure because they refuse to finish their sentences. They rise, they hint, they conceal. Egypt spoke with stone, Nubia continued the language, China reshaped it into hills of earth. Each voice adds a verse to the global chorus. And still, each verse ends the same way, trailing into silence, daring us to listen harder, leave deserts and plains behind, and step into the humid jungles of Southeast Asia. The air clings to your skin, warm and fragrant with earth and vegetation, leaves glistening with morning dew. Water drips from the canopy above in slow, rhythmic pulses, as if marking time for stone structures that have survived centuries of storms and decay. Through this lush tangle, glimpses of carved sandstone appear, towers rising above the foliage, their spires mirrored in shallow pools. This is Angkor, Cambodia, once the heart of the Khmer Empire. Angkor Wat stands at the centre, a stone mandala, designed to embody the cosmos. Each tower represents a mountain, each reflection in water a mirror of the heavens. Walk the causeways, and you can almost hear the whispers of ancient priests chanting, echoing faintly against walls carved with apsaras dancing, gods towering in relief. The temples are aligned to solstices, the rising sun striking central sanctuaries at precise hours. Geometry guides them, just as it guided pyramids from Giza to Teotihuacan to Xi'an. Further north, in the dense fields of North America, another civilization once built mountains from earth. Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis, rises from flat plains, a city larger than medieval London. Its central feature, Monk's Mound, is an immense earthen pyramid, its summit once crowned with wooden structures that have long since vanished. Archaeologists dug into the layers, revealing traces of mica, carefully spread to catch the sunlight. Even though it is not carved from stone like Angkor or Giza, it shares the same ambition, lifting mass skyward to mark sacred, political, and cosmological authority. Imagine the people of Cahokia moving in rhythm with the seasons, their labour marking time as precisely as astronomical events. Mounds were aligned with solstices and cardinal points. The city's size, its ceremonial plazas, and the alignment of its structures all suggest deliberate planning, deliberate symbolism, echoes of the same impulses that built pyramids across oceans and centuries. The labourers themselves, though long gone, left traces in subtle soil compaction, in buried objects, and carefully arranged ceremonial offerings. Their effort mirrors the human imprint at Giza, Teotihuacan, and Xi'an. Angkor and Cahokia also remind us that pyramidal ambition is not limited to stone. Angkor's sandstone towers, decorated with bas-relief, mimic mountains in miniature, while Cahokia's earthen mounds reach skyward from soil and clay. Both display advanced understanding of alignment, orientation, and human perception. Both blend sacred and civic purposes, a temple to the gods, a palace for rulers, a monument to community. Somewhere in this progression, the world shows a pattern. Sacred geometry, whether in stone, earth, or plaster, repeats itself across continents. The builders may not have communicated, yet the impulse resonates. Mountain-shaped constructions, precisely aligned, hiding or protecting something inside, visible and monumental yet withholding their full secrets. The sacred is as much about concealment as display. And yet, these echoes carry surprises. At Angkor, inscriptions mention rulers being lifted into divinity, aligning their bodies with the cosmic mountain. At Cahokia, soil tests reveal layers of organic matter interspersed with mica and burned clay, the meaning of which remains speculative. Both examples hint that sacred mountain may have functioned as a social machine, organising labour, belief, and space simultaneously. The pyramids of Mexico, Africa, China, Southeast Asia, and North America form a chorus that spans continents, a human refrain that is persistent and enigmatic. Here, as in earlier chapters, the human voice threads through stone. At Angkor, artisans carve their pride in bas-reliefs. At Cahokia, ceremonial items mark the labour of workers whose names we will never know. Like Giza's graffiti or the Meroe skeletons, these traces tell us that pyramids are as much about humanity as they are about the heavens. The structures endure, but it is the human endeavour beneath them, labour, care, ritual, and pride, that breathes life into the stone. Step back now, across the continents. The temples and mounds stretch out in your imagination. Angkor's towers mirrored in pools, Cahokia's pyramidal earth, the Nubian and Chinese tomb mounds. Each rises to claim sky and territory, each buries secrets within. The geometry and alignment whisper across time, linking cultures separated by thousands of miles, showing the same desire, to lift stone as a bridge between earth and heaven, mortal and divine. Perhaps this is what pyramids are meant to teach, not that one culture was superior, not that a single purpose defines them, but that humans, everywhere, are compelled to raise mountains from soil, to align them with stars, to encode their meaning in stone or earth, to gaze at the sky, to create a visible sign of devotion, ambition and memory. And in doing so, to leave a question for the ages. Why? The patterns persist, the designs are deliberate, and across deserts, plains and jungles, stone and soil endure, monuments to civilizations long past, whispering their questions through time. Even in their silence they speak. You stand at the edge of a cliff overlooking a misty river valley. The morning air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and moss, with faint bird calls echoing from distant trees. Around you, stones rise from the ground in strange formations, almost like deliberate markers, yet no one knows who placed them there or why. Your fingers brush a weathered rock, its surface smooth from centuries of wind and rain, and you feel a story beneath your skin, a story that has waited, patient and silent, for anyone to notice. In the distance, waves lap against a sunlit shore where a city may once have stood. Legends call it Atlantis, a place of impossible wealth and wisdom, swallowed by water in a single night. The myths insist on grandeur. Streets paved with polished stone, temples crowned with gold, machines or devices whose purpose is lost to memory. Scholars argue over its existence, debating whether it was moral allegory, philosophical invention, or memory of an actual city. You can imagine it all, the city alive, bustling with life, then gone, leaving only ripples in the ocean and echoes in the mind. Closer to home, in Egypt, stories of Zep-Tepi linger in the texts. The first time, they call it, when gods walked the earth and shaped monuments so perfectly that later kings could only imitate them. Granite carved with impossible precision, canals and structures aligned with celestial bodies, hints of knowledge too advanced for ordinary understanding. Imagine walking in that age, feeling the smooth stone beneath your fingers, hearing voices of the builders, their chants mingling with the wind, shaping the geometry of memory as much as of the earth. Across continents, echoes of the same impulse appear. In India, the Mahabharata speaks of weapons that could consume armies, of flying chariots and cities lifted by gods. In Scandinavia, the Norse sagas recount Ragnarok, a world-ending flood and fire followed by renewal. In the American Southwest, Hopi elders speak of great floods, guiding the survivors to safety. Each myth differs in detail, in culture, in voice, but the patterns persist. Great power, cataclysm, vanished civilizations, and monuments that resist explanation. Oddities intrude amid the stories. Some accounts of Atlantis mention canals filled with moving metals, or devices that emitted light. Zep-Tepi references granite implements that sang when handled, as though the stone itself held memory. Mahabharata describes mechanisms that shape the battlefield itself. These images are not proof, yet they anchor speculation in a tangible physical sense. Metal, stone, light. Something you can almost touch as you imagine the lost worlds. The lessons echo forward. Troy, long dismissed as legend, eventually revealed massive walls and gates beneath the soil. The Antikythera mechanism, once ignored as corroded junk, later proved to be an astronomical computer of astonishing complexity. Myth and legend, if read carefully, sometimes point to lost human achievement. What the ancients could do, what they built, and what they encoded in stone or story may still survive, partially buried or distorted, waiting to be understood. Your gaze drifts upward. The pyramids of Egypt, the mounds of Nubia and Xi'an, the temples of Angkor, the mounds of Cahokia, each rises from earth in deliberate form. Each aligns with sky or sun or stars. Each bears a memory. And now, as you listen to the wind whisper through the rocks, the myths themselves seem to speak. They remind you, civilizations vanish, but their questions, fears and triumphs linger in stone and story. and so the first chord of the Lost Ages sounds. You feel it beneath your fingertips in the curves of weathered stones and the rhythm of legends. The past is never entirely gone. Its echo endures, sometimes hidden in plain sight, sometimes waiting in the depths of the earth or the folds of a text, ready to challenge anyone who dares to listen. You kneel at the edge of a swollen river, the mud damp beneath your knees. The air carries a faint metallic tang, as if the soil remembers water it has absorbed for millennia. You imagine a deluge sweeping across the land, uprooting trees, moving boulders, reshaping valleys. Across cultures, floods are memory, warning, and myth all in one. The Hopi speak of great waters covering the land, of elders guiding survivors to high mesas, teaching them how to rebuild. Their chants, though long silenced, carry rhythm in your imagination, a cadence marking time, survival, and the continuity of culture. In the north, the Norse tell of Ragnarok, when oceans rise, the sky burns, and gods perish. Their stories preserve fear, awe, and the cyclical nature of existence. You can almost hear the creaking of world trees as the floodwaters lap their roots. In India, the Mahabharata recounts cataclysms of fire and water, cities swallowed, armies incinerated by divine power. Weapons of light, machines of war, and flying chariots hover in memory as instruments both practical and fantastical. You feel their weight as you step over imagined rubble, the power of myth embedding physics into story. Across the Atlantic you might glimpse the Caribbean or Atlantic sea floor. Scholars debate whether Plato's Atlantis was moral allegory, in memory of the Mediterranean's lost civilizations, or something more. Perhaps the city was real enough to inspire tales of kings, machines, and sunlit streets, now buried beneath waves. The myths converge in their intent, warning, memory, and wonder. Oddities appear in each tale. The Mahabharata speaks of weapons that split mountains and chariots that flashed like fire across the sky. Hopi oral tradition describes carved stones that guide the waters, echoing across valleys to amplify warning signals. Atlantis canals were said to move metals in ways the imagination struggles to explain. Each element reads as engineering, performance, or ritual, depending on the lens. Each gives a shadow of what might have existed, a puzzle for those willing to listen. The myths resonate with the pyramids you've seen. The alignment of monuments with stars, solstices, and cardinal points appears repeatedly across the globe. Each civilization sought to mark their knowledge in stone, earth, or story, leaving behind markers for the attentive observer. Teotihuacan's underground rivers shimmer like mercury. Xi'an's tomb mounds lie sealed and toxic with hidden metals. The Khufu pyramid's silent shafts point toward Orion. The myths themselves form a pattern, memory encoded in stone and narrative, waiting for discovery. Some researchers suggest these floods and cataclysms were more than allegory. Geological studies show periods of rapid sea level rise, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions consistent with these myths' timelines. Could human memory have preserved the memory of real events, translated into story and legend, into allegory, into cultural ritual? You feel the weight of the ages as you trace the patterns in your mind. Catastrophe remembered in imagination, transmitted as caution, warning, or awe. Yet skepticism persists. Scholars caution against literal reading, insist that allegory dominates, and argue that coincidence and archetype explain recurring flood myths. Others admit unease, noting uncanny similarities between myths separated by thousands of miles. One archaeologist muttered, half in jest, "If every flood legend were a weather report, we'd have a global forecasting system by now." Humour keeps them human, yet does not dismiss the persistent puzzle. The myths do more than describe destruction. They encode human response, resilience, and ingenuity. They preserve survival techniques, social structures, and beliefs in layers both overt and hidden. In imagining survivors fleeing high mesas, priests organising rituals, engineers devising canals, or rulers recording celestial phenomena, you glimpse the same drive that created the pyramids, to order the world, to understand the forces beyond, and to leave something enduring. As the sun dips below your imagined horizon, the river in front of you swells, reflecting clouds streaked in gold. Floods, fires, vanished cities, divine interventions, celestial alignments. The myths converge into a single refrain. Humanity witnesses, reacts, builds, and then remembers. The past persists not only in stone but in story. And so this chapter of Lost Ages ends with a question, lingering like the final echo in a vast chamber. What has survived beyond the myths themselves? Are these echoes of reality, fragments of memory or inventions meant to awe and warn? Across deserts, valleys, oceans and mountains the Lost Ages whisper, and somewhere, if you listen carefully, they may still be heard. The horizon stretches out, water meeting sky, and you feel the weight of memory pressing against the present. Waves lap quietly against a forgotten shore, and the sun glints on spray, each droplet a tiny mirror of the past. Imagine Atlantis here, a city of impossible wealth, its streets paved in gleaming stone, temples reaching skyward, and rivers of metals that no longer flow. The city's towers shimmer in memory, though the water has reclaimed them. You cannot see it, cannot touch it, yet the pulse of the legend is tangible, almost physical. Stories insist the Atlanteans were masters, their knowledge far beyond what survives. Some say they controlled water, energy and stone, shaping mountains and rivers alike. Plato's text hints at machines and mechanisms, but the words are poetic, intentionally veiled, leaving gaps that imagination fills. You can almost hear the echo of gears and flowing metal beneath the waves, a heartbeat from a civilization that may never have existed, or one we have yet to find. And yet the echoes of this lost age are not isolated. In Egypt, the shafts and hidden chambers of the Great Pyramid suggest precision and intention that ordinary tombs cannot explain. In Mexico, mercury courses beneath Teotihuacan's temples, as if rivers themselves were captured to map a cosmology. In China, Qin Shi Huang's tomb lies sealed with metal and guardians, its secrets preserved beneath earth and legend. Across continents, patterns repeat, structures aligned to the sky, materials chosen for properties we barely understand, labour organised at monumental scale. In North America, Cahokia's earthen mounds rise silently from the plains. They too were aligned, crafted and layered with care, encoding knowledge and ritual into soil. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat reflects the heavens in its pools, towers reaching upward in perfect proportion. The human impulse to raise mountains of stone or earth, to inscribe meaning across space, to encode knowledge into permanence, is universal. It is also fragile, ever subject to time, flood, and forgetting. Oddities draw your attention. Some say Atlantis canals channeled metals that emitted light, producing glimpses of artificial sun. The pyramids of Egypt might have been tuned to vibrations of stone. Teotihuacan's tunnels shimmered with mercury. The Mahabharata tells of chariots that lifted above the earth, of weapons that burned and split mountains. All these details flicker at the edge of possibility, hinting at technology or ritual that has been lost, veiled by time and narrative. Skeptics have long scoffed. Plato's tale, they insist, is moral allegory, not history. Modern archaeologists dismiss mercury pools as symbolic or ceremonial, not practical. In every case, doubt persists. Yet even the doubters cannot erase the patterns, cannot fully explain why structures of enormous scale and precision appear across millennia and continents, often associated with myths of great catastrophe, lost knowledge, or divine intervention. Step back and take the full panorama in your mind's eye. From Giza's silent pyramids to Teotihuacan's glittering underworld, from Meroa's spires to Xi'an's earthen mounds, Angkor's reflective towers to Cahokia's earthworks, the world seems stitched together with a single thread. That thread is human ambition, imagination and memory. It is encoded not just in stone, soil or metal, but in story, myths of floods, cataclysms and vanished civilizations. And so the chorus of lost ages swells. Atlantis hums beneath the waves. Zep-Tepi whispers through Egyptian granite. Mahabharata's armies march again in imagination. Ragnarok crashes across fjords. Hopi survivors climb mesas in your mind's eye. Across continents and epochs, the echoes converge, carrying a single refrain. Humans rise, create, vanish, and remember. Sometimes in stone, sometimes in story, sometimes in both. Even now, as you step away from the imagined shore, the pulse of these civilizations seems to linger. The waves retreat, leaving only sand and wind, but memory remains. What was real? What was embellished? What was misremembered? Perhaps it matters less than the fact that we continue to ask. The myths of lost ages remind you that the past is never silent. Even when civilizations vanish, their questions, their ingenuity, and their awe endure, challenging each generation to listen harder, to imagine further, to wonder. You walk through a city of sand and dust, streets empty except for the wind carrying scraps of papyrus and ash. The air smells faintly of ink and smoke, as if centuries of learning linger still in invisible threads. Somewhere, not far from here, a library once stood, its shelves heavy with knowledge that would never be read again. The Library of Alexandria, scholars say, burned, and with it the sum of human curiosity, carefully catalogued in scrolls and codices. Imagine the scrolls lined like soldiers, each carrying maps of stars, treatises on medicine, geometry and machines whose blueprints we will never reconstruct. Some of these texts may have described devices that could manipulate water, capture the sky in stone, or turn Earth itself into energy. All vanished in smoke, leaving only traces in references by later thinkers. The human mind remembers them in fragments, echoes of lost sophistication that ripple through time. In Baghdad, the House of Wisdom faced a similar fate. Scholars translated Greek, Indian and Persian works, creating a repository unmatched in its era. But war, fire and conquest consumed it. Books that might have described telescopes, chemical reactions or energy sources were burned, lost to history. You can almost hear the crackling of parchment, feel the heat of destruction, sense the panic of minds watching knowledge vanish in flames. The Antikythera mechanism offers a sliver of hope. Recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek coast, it resembles a small box of bronze gears, a calculator, some argue, able to predict eclipses and track the motions of planets. For centuries it lay ignored, corroding beneath the sea, misunderstood as debris. Only modern eyes saw its intricacy. Imagine discovering a fragment of genius, preserved by accident, a remnant of human ingenuity that reminds us. Even lost knowledge leaves whispers behind. Even in the Americas, codices burned by conquistadors tell the same story. Mayan and Aztec manuscripts dense with astronomical calculations, ritual guides, and city plans were considered heretical and destroyed. The surviving fragments tantalize with glimpses of sophistication. Calendars more precise than Europe had yet achieved, architectural plans hinting at alignment with stars, ritual knowledge interwoven with urban planning. The effort, the labour, the insight almost entirely erased. Oddities persist in unexpected corners. In Germany, a medieval manuscript describes mechanical birds that fly with clockwork wings. In China, texts describe devices that could lift water, turn drums, or automate gates. Perhaps they worked. Perhaps they were allegory. The pattern repeats. Humans create, innovate, imagine, and too often their inventions vanish, leaving myths behind, preserved in story rather than in function. The rhythm of loss is punctuated by discovery. One moment a shipwreck yields a machine. The next, a scroll in a monastery describes an energy source without revealing how it worked. You can trace a thread from Giza's voids to Teotihuacan's mercury, from Angkor's pools to Antikythera's gears, a network of lost knowledge scattered across time and space. And yet, for every discovery, a dozen other secrets remain buried. You pause in the imagined corridors of Alexandria, feeling the weight of absent shelves. The inkless pages hum faintly under your touch, carrying questions that will never be answered. Every lost manuscript, every destroyed codex, every shattered artifact represents a story half told, a skill forgotten, a lesson unlearned. And when you step outside into the bright sun, the wind carries the scent of sand and memory, whispering that human ingenuity is resilient. It may vanish, but it leaves traces, echoes and shadows that continue to provoke wonder. So you walk along the silent streets, imagining the minds that once moved here, that calculated, wrote and built machines of bronze, stone and thought. Perhaps some knowledge was too dangerous, too delicate, or too ahead of its time. Perhaps it was preserved in myth instead of manuscript. And as the wind sweeps through the ruins, you realize the past never fully disappears. Its whispers linger, waiting for a listener patient enough to hear, attentive enough to imagine, and bold enough to wonder. You step through a narrow corridor of time where dust settles like fine snow over the ruins of human ambition. The air is thick with history, each breath tasting of parchment, stone and smoke. Somewhere in your mind, a candle flickers in a scriptorium, casting shadows over manuscripts that record astronomical calculations, engineering plans and mystical formulas, all now largely unreadable. The hum of lost knowledge vibrates faintly beneath your feet, as if the earth itself remembers what humans once encoded in words, stone and metal. In the Mediterranean, the Antikythera mechanism waits beneath turquoise waves. Its bronze gears, once perfectly aligned, tracked celestial bodies with precision that confounds modern understanding. Imagine the hands that turned it, the minds that calculated its ratios, the civilization capable of conceiving such a machine. And then consider the centuries it remained submerged, rusted and forgotten, until a diver stumbled upon it in the early 20th century. It was a fragment, small enough to hold in one hand, yet large in implication, a proof that ingenuity leaves whispers, even when its voice is drowned by time. Further east, in China, buried beneath layers of earth in imperial tombs, lie mechanisms meant to automate gates, measure rivers, or mimic celestial movements. Archaeologists can only guess at the full scope. These machines may have been instruments of power, tools for ritual, or experiments in engineering. Their remnants are fragile, corroded or obscured, but the precision survives in the small surviving fragments. You can almost hear the clatter of bronze, the grinding of gears designed to move water or weight or light, each piece a note in a song long silenced. Across the Atlantic, Mayan codices whisper through time. Burned by conquistadors and lost to fire, the surviving fragments reveal a civilization tracking Venus's movements with mathematical rigour, aligning temples to solstices and recording ceremonial calendars with uncanny precision. In Yucatan, Chichen Itza echoes with the invisible pulse of knowledge once encoded in stone, wood and codices. The Quetzal's call resonates against platforms and pyramids, a natural note in a grand orchestration of human understanding, blending art, architecture and astronomy. Oddities appear in unexpected corners. A medieval manuscript in Germany describes mechanical birds with clockwork wings. In Persia, sketches of automata appear, figures that pour water, move on command, or sound horns, long before modern robotics. These inventions are glimpses of forgotten skill, hints of intelligence recorded but not preserved in function. Each oddity sparks the same question. How much knowledge has vanished entirely, and how much survives only in fragments, stories, or myth? Even libraries that survive destruction bear signs of neglect. Scrolls unrolled only once, margins filled with annotations long faded, illustrations smeared by centuries of handling. All artifacts of human memory struggling against time. Imagine the scholars who copied text by candlelight, the artisans who prepared inks, the builders of temples and towers who enacted practical science every day without writing it down. Their work formed an invisible network that connected knowledge across continents. And yet, for every manuscript preserved, 10 more were lost, burned, buried, or dissolved into memory. Scholars and skeptics argue about significance, provenance, and authenticity. Some dismiss the artifacts as curiosity, coincidence, or minor anomalies. Others, more daring, imagine the possibilities. Energy harnessed in hidden chambers, astronomical knowledge encoded in geometry, or machines capable of feats long since lost. The tension between preservation and loss, skepticism and wonder, stretches across time as sharply as any pyramid or mound. Step back into the present. The air is quiet, yet it vibrates faintly with memory. You feel the pull of civilizations lost and found, the echo of hands moving parchment, turning bronze, carving stone, and burying secrets. These fragments, machines, codices, tools, and writings, remind you that knowledge is never fully erased. Even in decay, even in myth, human ingenuity endures, like a pulse beneath the earth, waiting for those who dare to uncover it. And as you leave the imagined corridors of libraries, tombs, and lost cities, one thought lingers. How much of what we know is shadowed by what has been forgotten? How much intelligence, observation, and artistry lies hidden beneath the earth, the ruins, the texts? Perhaps someday someone will trace the pattern, read the fragments, and hear again the song of lost ages. Until then, the knowledge waits, patient, silent, and eternal. You step into a long corridor lined with shadowed alcoves. The air smells faintly of stone dust and old parchment, and somewhere nearby, a breeze whispers through cracks in the walls. You imagine the hands that touched this place centuries ago, scribes, engineers, priests, leaving traces of their intelligence, careful notes, and tentative designs, many of which will never survive. The corridor itself feels alive, holding memory in its structure, hums of insight buried beneath layers of time. In Alexandria, scrolls that could have mapped the stars with precision, recorded the movement of planets, or documented inventions beyond our modern understanding were lost in fire. They vanished, but references to them survived, tantalizing hints of ideas too advanced to reconstruct fully. You can picture a scholar's candle flickering over glyphs and diagrams, the wax dripping, smoke curling, and the ink seeping into fibres, leaving impressions of knowledge and vision that time will not forgive. Far from the Mediterranean, in the deserts of Nubia, the pyramids themselves hold secrets. Their angled chambers, precise measurements, and hidden shafts suggest not only burial, but potential experimentation. Even if the original purpose is lost, the echoes remain in stone, in weight distribution, in alignment, in resonance. You sense the builder's intent beneath the dust, a persistence of design that hints at comprehension long forgotten. In China, Qin Shi Huang's tomb lies sealed with mercury rivers and guardian figures. Its secrets are inaccessible, yet scientists can detect the metal and imagine what was intended. Were the rivers symbolic, practical, or both? The precision of the burial, the apparent engineering knowledge, hints at a civilization capable of achieving remarkable feats that have been half erased by time. You trace the outline of these ambitions, wondering what innovations were lost when the tomb was sealed, and the emperor's knowledge departed with him. Across oceans, the Americas carry their own hidden legacies. At Cahokia, the mounds rise from the plains, carefully aligned, layered with materials whose significance is still under study. Every layer, every artifact suggests planning, ritual and knowledge encoded in Earth itself. The labourers who raised the mounds left their mark in soil composition, ceremonial deposits, and the sheer scale of their work. Even without written record, the mounds are a testament to understanding that has been partially forgotten. Odd details appear in unexpected corners. Medieval manuscripts describe mechanical birds, automata that pour water or strike bells, devices that mimic celestial movements. In India, texts speak of flying chariots and weapons that split the earth. In the deserts of Mexico, mercury pools lie beneath pyramids. Each fragment, each story, hints at an intelligence that is only partially recorded, a pattern of human curiosity repeated, scattered across continents, centuries and cultures. Skeptics caution against overinterpretation. They say correlation is not causation. A bronze bird does not prove a global design. Yet the patterns persist. Across time and space, humans have sought to measure, manipulate and immortalize knowledge. Pyramids, mounds, temples, codices and machines all encode intention and understanding, whether it survives fully or only in fragments. Even in decay, the traces suggest capability, ambition and ingenuity. As you step back, imagining all these lost libraries, buried machines and scattered monuments, a quiet truth emerges. The past is never fully gone. It endures in fragments, in shadows, in myths, and in stone. Knowledge may vanish from sight, but the human impulse to learn, calculate, build, and encode remains. You feel the pulse of generations that laboured, observed, and imagined. A heartbeat hidden beneath the sands, the oceans, the soil, and the walls of forgotten rooms. And so this chapter of lost knowledge closes with a question lingering in the air. How much of what we know today is shaped not by what survives, but by what has been erased? The monuments remain, the myths endure, and somewhere beneath it all the ingenuity of past civilizations waits quietly, patient and eternal for those willing to uncover it. You stand once more on the Giza plateau, though this time the sun has long set. The desert is cool, and the air carries a faint trace of stone dust mixed with machine oil, the scent of modern curiosity. Torches have been replaced by lasers and sensors, by scientists with clipboards, laptops, and an insatiable curiosity. You can hear the faint whir of equipment, low hums that seem to echo the pulse of the pyramids themselves. Here, the past meets the present, and the silence of millennia is pierced not by voices, but by questions encoded in particles and beams. In 2017, Muon detectors quietly counted particles passing through stone. These detectors, sensitive to subatomic vibrations, revealed something astonishing. A massive void, the size of a passenger jet lurking above the Grand Gallery. Imagine the engineers huddled in tents, their breath fogging in the cold night air, watching numbers blink on screens, trying to reconcile centuries of architecture with a hidden space no human eye had seen. The void was not an entrance, not a chamber, not a corridor. It was absence, deliberate, monumental and precise. As you lean closer, you can almost feel it in the silence. A gap in the pyramid's body that hums not with air but with possibility. Skeptics argue it is coincidence, structural anomaly, or the error of builders. Yet even those who doubt cannot ignore the scale or location of this space, perfectly aligned with other internal shafts and chambers. One engineer admitted quietly that he felt unease. Coincidence, perhaps, he said, but his notes betrayed fascination. The pyramid refuses to fold neatly into charts and lecture slides. Oddities multiply. Thermal imaging has revealed temperature anomalies in the king's chamber, pockets of warmth where none should exist. These subtle shifts, invisible to the naked eye, hint at hidden cavities or materials with properties beyond ordinary limestone. Sensors detect currents, subtle changes in density, echoes that do not match the stone layout. Imagine being there, touching the walls, feeling the cool, smooth surface give nothing in response, yet sensing a secret waiting to be heard. You recall the graffiti scratched into the lower galleries, names, jests, small reminders of labourers who toiled here. Their legacy contrasts with the sterile precision of modern scans, yet in both cases a story is revealed. The drunkards of Menkaure may have laughed as they hauled blocks, while today scientists watch silently, mesmerised by invisible voids and vibrations. The human pulse persists, though the forms have changed. Across the globe, other modern investigations echo these discoveries. LiDAR scans of Angkor revealed cities long hidden beneath jungle canopy, streets, canals and temples, appearing as though the Earth itself had decided to preserve the secret for centuries. In the Americas, aerial imaging uncovered mound complexes previously lost to farmland and forest. Engineers and archaeologists follow signals and shadows, patterns in stone and soil that hint at structure, purpose, and the deliberate hand of long-gone builders. Some researchers push further, testing the resonances of stone with modern tools. Piezoelectric quartz embedded in granite might respond to vibration. Sound could lift dust, shift perception, or even produce energy in ways not fully understood. Experiments are delicate, meticulous, and sometimes fail. Yet each failure is a clue. You imagine technicians in white coats, their hands trembling slightly as they tap granite. Record the echoes, adjust parameters, each test a step toward understanding a design laid down thousands of years ago. Skeptics remain vocal. Some laugh quietly at theories of hidden machines, energy generation or resonance. Others mutter about coincidences and statistics. One joked that if the pyramid were a power plant, it would be the worst in history. No wires, no lights, no meters. Yet, despite levity, the pyramid endures, resisting explanation. It holds secrets that refuse to be catalogued, diagrams that cannot fully capture its complexity, and voids that exist beyond human expectation. As you step back from the detectors, the desert spreads before you in darkness. The pyramids tower silently, indifferent to instruments, speculation, and scholarly debate. Yet through this stillness, the pulse of curiosity persists, bridging the millennia between builders and modern investigators. And in that pulse, you feel a question vibrate through the air. What remains unseen, even now, and what will it whisper when finally understood? You walk along the plateau again, this time under the early morning sun. The stones are warm beneath your fingertips, rough and ancient, yet the air carries a faint hum of activity. Laptops whirring, drones buzzing, and voices whispering over radios. Scientists move methodically, their eyes scanning grids, shadows, and laser points projected across the pyramid's surface. Every metre of stone is measured, mapped, and photographed. You feel the weight of the centuries pressing against this modern curiosity, a bridge between ancient builders and today's observers. LiDAR scans, once restricted to research institutes, now reveal hidden structures beneath dense jungle or farmland. At Angkor Wat, the ancient Khmer city emerges in layers, streets, canals, and temples invisible to the casual observer now appear as if drawn by an unseen hand. You can trace the watercourses, imagine priests gliding along in ceremonial boats, and feel the meticulous planning encoded in earth and stone. Similarly, in Central America, satellite imaging uncovers mound complexes once lost to forest and agriculture. The scale, the alignment, and the hidden pathways suggest a sophistication that mirrors the pyramids. You can almost hear the builders' footsteps echoing through time, even as leaves rustle overhead. Some discoveries remain stubbornly elusive. Research attempts are sometimes blocked by bureaucracy, local restrictions, or inaccessible terrain. Plans to drill or scan voids inside pyramids are delayed, denied, or limited. You can imagine the frustration, the hum of machines ready to probe centuries-old secrets, technicians poised to gather data, yet barred from reaching the heart of mystery. Each obstruction adds to the legend. The pyramid refuses to yield, teasing investigators with what it will and will not reveal. Modern engineers experiment with resonance and vibration, testing whether the pyramid might have been more than a tomb. Sensors capture subtle shifts as stones respond to induced frequencies. Instruments tremble, dust lifts in microcurrents, and the gallery itself seems to participate in the experiment. Some researchers wonder whether the ancient builders understood the same physics in intuitive ways, whether stone was arranged to channel energy, sound, or force, and yet every result is partial, every measurement only a shadow of what may have been. The human dimension persists, even amid technology. Skeletons from workers' cemeteries tell a story of endurance, skill, and care. Healed fractures, worn joints, and healed wounds reveal medical knowledge and attention to labourers' welfare. You feel the rhythm of human effort, the pulse of daily toil encoded in bone, and imagine the laughter, grunts, and songs of those who carried massive stones, poured water over sand, and aligned blocks with uncanny precision. Even without beer and graffiti, their presence is palpable, a counterpoint to the sterile hum of modern instruments. Oddities continue to surface. Thermal anomalies appear in unexpected niches, suggesting voids or materials with unusual properties. Small blocks of granite bear marks that seem too deliberate for casual construction, yet their purpose remains unknown. Every new finding adds intrigue, yet raises more questions than it answers. You can almost hear the debates. One archaeologist muttering about structural necessity, another shrugging half in jest. If we allow machines here, every ancient temple suddenly becomes a factory. Humour tempers curiosity, keeping human perspective alive amid technical marvels. Global echoes intensify the sense of wonder. At Stonehenge, acoustics experiments suggest that standing stones amplify certain sounds, voices, drums, or wind, in ways that may have guided ritual or ceremony. In Malta's Hippogem, whispers carried through carved corridors affect brainwave patterns, lulling visitors into trance-like states. Each discovery, in a different time and place, reflects a universal curiosity, humans shaping stone, space, and sound, seeking effects beyond ordinary perception. The pyramids, while unique, are part of a larger pattern, a network of human ingenuity whose full scope remains hidden. As you step back, scanning the plateau in sunlight and shadow, you feel a mixture of awe and restraint. The pyramids are vast, impenetrable, and precise. Even now, after centuries of study, they resist full comprehension. Maps, scans, and measurements can reveal structure, but not intent. The stones remain silent in one sense, yet they hum with possibility, carrying echoes of builders, researchers, and civilizations that sought to understand the world and leave a mark that would endure. And so you turn from the machines, the lasers, and the silent observers, feeling the quiet insistence of mystery. Each discovery is a doorway, each measurement a question, and the plateau itself a reminder that even modern investigation cannot fully resolve what the ancients encoded. What secrets remain just beyond reach, waiting for those willing to probe, listen, and imagine. You stand at the edge of the Great Pyramid's shadow, the sun now high and harsh, illuminating the limestone blocks that have endured millennia. The air smells of stone, dust, and the faint tang of electronics from modern devices scattered across the plateau. Scientists move among tripods, Mune detectors, and laser scanners, measuring every angle, every shadow, every subtle vibration. You feel the pulse of human curiosity pressing through time, connecting builders and modern investigators in an unbroken line of wonder. Thermal cameras reveal unexpected warmth in hidden niches, pockets of energy where none should exist. Sensors detect subtle density variations inside massive stones, faint echoes of chambers yet unseen. Engineers tap walls with devices, watching instruments tremble as vibrations travel through granite. Dust lifts slightly in response, and even standing several meters away, you can sense the odd rhythm of these ancient structures, precise, deliberate, and still mysterious. The pyramid is no longer a silent monument. It participates in the investigation, teasing researchers with what it will reveal and what it will not. Across the world, parallels unfold. Stonehenge's standing stones amplify sound in uncanny ways. Drums or voices resonate, seemingly guided by geometry. Malta's hypogeum still manipulates whispers, turning them into immersive sensations that affect perception and mood. These global echoes suggest a shared understanding across civilizations, a human instinct to shape stone and space not merely for shelter or ceremony, but to manipulate experience itself. And yet each location remains partial, fragmentary, hinting at lost knowledge that cannot be fully reconstructed. Within Egypt, the pyramid itself yields surprises. Muon scans detect voids above galleries, massive spaces that could hide chambers, machinery, or secret passageways. The shapes defy simple explanation, a testament to builders whose intentions remain inaccessible. Skeptics voice their doubts, some muttering dryly, "If this is a power plant, it's remarkably low maintenance." Others joke about receipts and meters that never existed. Humour tempers the awe, reminding investigators that despite their instruments, the pyramid story resists full narration. You imagine the people who once laboured here. Skeletons reveal spines bent under weight, knees ground down, yet fractures healed with care. Workers' graffiti, faint red lines scratched into limestone, records pride and presence. Their labour, skill and endurance are encoded in both human remains and the stones themselves. Modern sensors pick up patterns in these structures, but it is the human element that makes them resonate. The builder's effort bridges past and present, grounding the speculative science in lived experience. Oddities abound. Small granite blocks bear marks of unknown purpose. Shafts point precisely towards celestial bodies. Cavities remain unexplored. Some instruments detect shifts in resonance that appear almost intentional, as though sound, vibration, and energy were considered in the design. Each anomaly challenges assumptions and invites speculation. Were these purely ceremonial, practical, experimental? You feel the same wonder that has gripped engineers and archaeologists for decades, a shared sensation of standing on the edge of human genius. Modern tools, however, have limits. Scanners reach only so far. Laser beams cannot penetrate every stone. Drilling or excavation is blocked by preservation rules, legal restrictions, and the desire to protect the monument. Some discoveries must remain tentative, inferred from shadows, vibrations, and density changes rather than directly observed. And yet, even in partial knowledge the pyramid communicates. Its architecture, materials, and hidden spaces speak of intention, insight, and understanding that challenge modern imagination. As you step back, the plateau stretches wide, the pyramid's shadow cutting across sand and limestone. The sun is high, wind carries a faint hum, almost imperceptible, but enough to suggest the pulse of history itself. The pyramid resists complete explanation. Even with Muon scans, thermal imaging, LiDAR and drones, mysteries remain. Diagrams and models cannot fully capture its scale, its design, or its secrets. And so you leave with a question pressing in your chest. What remains unseen, buried, or deliberately hidden, waiting for a mind curious enough to perceive it, and patient enough to understand? You stand again on the plateau as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the limestone. The air is warm with fading heat, and dust stirs in the light, catching the last rays like particles of memory suspended in time. Around you, the Great Pyramid towers, silent, indifferent, yet somehow speaking in the language of scale, alignment and endurance. You feel the pulse of centuries beneath your feet. Builders, rulers, labourers, and modern investigators all connected through stone, imagination, and effort. The king's chamber lies ahead in thought if not in reach, its granite coffer silent. Its walls have witnessed centuries of human ambition, of rituals, of curiosity. You imagine pharaohs standing there, priests whispering, labourers hauling massive blocks day after day, season after season. Bones uncovered centuries later tell a story of resilience, spines bent but healed, fractures tended, muscles worn yet capable. The pyramid is more than stone. It is the accumulation of human energy and attention, recorded in form, material, and silent intention. Some say the pyramid is only a tomb. Others, like Chris Dunn, see it as a machine, an instrument, perhaps a generator of energy, vibration, or something lost to memory. Modern investigations hint at mysteries still unresolved. Muon voids, thermal anomalies, and acoustic peculiarities that suggest design beyond funerary function. Each discovery reframes the pyramid not as static relic, but as living dialogue across millennia. And yet, definitive answers remain elusive. Perhaps they always will. Oddities linger in the details. Graffiti etched into the stone, the drunkards of Menkaure, remind you of the humour and humanity of those who laboured here. Napoleon's peculiar nighttime visit casts another shadow. A man of theatre, possibly leveraging silence as legend. Even the smallest gestures, a scratched name, a pale officer, a careful measurement, carry stories that defy the linearity of history. Each adds texture to the grand narrative, a reminder that power is not only in rulers or stones, but in those who act, resist, or simply endure. Global echoes weave themselves into the reflection. Across the world, monuments rise in alignment, proportion, and intention. Teotihuacan, with its red pyramid of the sun, pulses beneath layers of earth and mercury. Angkor Wat mirrors celestial pathways. Cahokia's mounds rise from the plains like silent sentinels. In each, human hands attempted to control space, time, and perception, leaving traces that invite awe, speculation, and respect. Patterns appear. Precision, endurance, and ambition etched into stone, soil, or story. Humour persists, even in reflection. Beer jars clinked in the galleries of Menkaure, laughter chasing echoes. Graffiti spoke of pride, mischief, or identity. These small touches contrast with grandeur and silence, reminding you that human experience is layered, mundane, vital, and sometimes whimsical, alongside ambition and design. The juxtaposition makes the monuments more relatable, more alive, and more haunting in their endurance. You consider the builders, the rulers, and the modern investigators together. Each approached the pyramid with tools available, knowledge accessible, and questions pressing. Each left traces in stone, paper, data, or anecdote. The pyramid endures beyond them all, impartial to intent, time, or interpretation. It is at once monument, machine, and mystery, resisting simple categorization, yet inviting inquiry from those willing to see, measure, and imagine. And as twilight deepens, the plateau grows quiet, yet not still. Dust drifts along corridors of history, carrying whispers of labour, ingenuity, and ambition. The pyramid's voice is subtle, its message layered, its meaning refracted through every human observer. You're left with a sense of continuity, power exercised, memory preserved, and the enduring echo of human purpose. What the builders meant, what the rulers intended, and what the machines might have done are questions that endure, carried forward in stone and story alike. You wander along the plateau as the last light of day softens edges and cools the stones. The air feels thick with centuries, each grain of sand a memory, each limestone block a testament to effort and intention. You imagine hands lifting, aligning and smoothing these stones, fingers bruised, nails caked with dust, eyes squinting against the sun. The labourers are long gone, yet traces of their lives remain, in graffiti etched into the stone, in skeletal remains with spines bent but healed, in whispers of song and laughter carried across millennia. Modern investigators move through the pyramid with tools undreamed of by its builders: lasers, muon detectors, and thermal scanners. Each device probes the unknown, revealing voids and hidden spaces, thermal anomalies, and subtle shifts in resonance. Engineers debate, measure, and record, yet the stones reveal only fragments of their secrets. One skeptic mutters dryly, "If this is a power plant, it's the most inconvenient one in history. No meters, no wires, no maintenance logs." The humour cuts through tension, a reminder that human observation, while sophisticated, is still bounded by perspective. Across the globe, echoes of similar ambition resound. In Malta's Hypogeum, carved chambers amplify whispers into trance-like hums. At Göbekli Tepe, massive stone pillars focus sound in ways that hint at ritual and design. Teotihuacan's underground mercury pools reflect light and gravity, preserved beneath layers of soil and civilization. Even in distant Europe, Stonehenge resonates with drum beats and song, its stones tuned in ways that modern experimenters are only beginning to understand. The human impulse to shape matter, energy, and perception appears universal, bridging continents and eras. Oddities persist in every corner. A mechanical bird described in a medieval manuscript flaps its wings with clockwork precision. Ancient texts in China record automata that lift water or sound horns. In the deserts of Mexico, hidden tunnels shimmer with metallic glints. Each anomaly suggests intelligence, experimentation, and ambition. Fragments of knowledge half remembered, half forgotten, surviving only in artifact or tale. You sense a pattern. Humans have always sought to manipulate their environment, to encode knowledge in tangible, enduring form. You return to the pyramid itself. The shafts, chambers, and voids remain silent, yet their precision speaks. Every alignment, every cavity, every polished surface hints at intention and understanding, even if the original purpose is lost to history. You feel the weight of human ingenuity, the ambition of builders who moved massive stones and calculated celestial alignments without the instruments of today. Their work resonates not only in stone but in time, a pulse that connects them to the investigators and dreamers who follow centuries later. Even humour and humanity persist. Graffiti remains a trace of pride, mischief, and identity. Workers' laughter, imagined in the corridors, contrasts with the sterile quiet of modern measurement, reminding you that human presence has always been intertwined with monumental achievement. The builders laboured with purpose, yet retained personality, wit, and community. Their lives, their endurance, are embedded in the stones, echoing subtly through the centuries. As dusk gives way to night, the plateau cools further. Shadows lengthen and merge. You stand in the fading light, sensing that the pyramid, the labourers, the investigators, and the legends are connected by invisible threads. Persistence, intention, and memory. The stones endure, and in them human curiosity and effort continue to resonate. And so, the question persists, lingering in the quiet desert air. What remains hidden beyond tools, texts, and measurements, waiting for someone patient and curious enough to uncover it? The pyramid, like all great works, is both a monument and a mystery, carrying knowledge, power, and memory into the future, long after those who built it have passed. The night has settled across the plateau, stars pricking the sky above Giza. The air is cool, carrying a faint trace of stone and sand. You imagine the builders long gone, their songs, grunts, and laughter dissolved into the desert wind, yet their work endures. Granite blocks, massive and precise, hold the story of countless hands, minds, and ambitions. Even in darkness, the pyramid speaks, not in words, but in proportion, alignment, and endurance. The coffer in the king's chamber remains empty, yet it continues to hold weight in memory. Its silence is intentional, or perhaps incidental, but it frames the human story as much as the stone itself. Skeletons from the workers' cemetery tell another tale. Spines curved from labour, knees worn smooth, fractures healed with care. They are a testament not only to endurance, but to a society that valued its people enough to see them tended, even after injury. In the echoes of human effort you hear pride, perseverance and ingenuity stitched into the pyramid's very fabric. Modern investigations continue to probe these silent halls. Muon scans, thermal imaging, and acoustic tests reveal hidden voids, shifts in density, and subtle vibrations. Each finding is a whisper from the past, a thread that connects builders, engineers, and dreamers across millennia. Skeptics still joke, engineers still measure, and scientists still debate. One muttered, half in jest, "If this is a power plant, at least it runs without supervision." Another mused that every stone circle across Europe might secretly hum if only we had the right instruments. Humour, here, tempers wonder and maintains perspective, while the plateau itself remains indifferent. Global echoes remind you that Giza is not alone. In Sudan, Nubian pyramids rise in quiet precision. Across the Pacific, Angkor Wat mirrors celestial pathways in reflective pools. At Cahokia, mounds map the sun, and seasons in earth and soil. Malta's hypogeum amplifies whispers into trance-like hums, and Göbekli Tepe shapes voices through massive carved pillars. Patterns emerge across continents, humans striving to encode knowledge, ritual, and power into stone, earth, and architecture. Even if we cannot fully understand the intent, the persistence of these patterns is undeniable. Oddities pepper this narrative, hinting at the ingenuity lost or misunderstood. Mechanical birds, automata, and devices described in ancient texts suggest an experimental mind at work, searching for ways to manipulate energy, sound, or perception. Mercury rivers, resonant chambers, and precise alignments persist across sites. Each artifact, measurement, or story is a fragment, a shadow of a larger understanding, a whisper of civilizations whose knowledge has only partially survived. Humour and humanity remain woven in. Graffiti, once etched by labourers, remains faint but legible. A playful note, a team name, a joke scratched into limestone. These traces contrast the monumental scale of ambition with the personal touch of those who carried the weight. Pride, mischief, and care echo through time alongside power, ritual, and architecture. As you step back from the plateau, the stars glimmer above and the pyramid towers silently below. Stone, labour, and memory intersect here, resisting definitive explanation yet speaking across millennia. Builders, rulers, and modern investigators share a connection through curiosity, effort, and imagination. The pyramid is a repository not only of knowledge, but of human persistence, endurance, and creativity. And as night deepens, one final thought lingers. The stones endure, listening longer than any theory, observing longer than any inquiry, and waiting patiently. Critics may debate, researchers may measure, and historians may reconstruct. Yet the plateau holds its secrets, carrying forward the pulse of human ambition. The pyramid is neither fully understood nor fully silent. It is a living monument to memory, power, and the enduring desire to leave a mark upon the world. Hello there, and as you linger in thought, the Great Pyramid stretches above you, bathed in twilight. The desert has quieted, though not emptied. The wind carries whispers of stone, sand, and memory. You stand at the edge of history, between the builders who laboured with sweat and skill, the rulers who commanded ambition, and the investigators who pressed forward with curiosity and technology. The pyramid, in its silence, contains all of them, yet none can claim its final word. You think of the bread and beer that fueled labourers, the graffiti they left, playful, proud, ephemeral. Their humour survives in scratches on stone, faint but resolute. You recall Napoleon, pale and hesitant, who once crossed these halls in awe and fear, a man confronting not only monuments but the weight of history itself. You remember the scholars who scrutinised, debated, and sometimes mocked, their voices echoing alongside modern measurements and Mune scans. Each adds a layer to the story, yet the pyramid retains its own agency. Consider the machines that may have existed, half lost or mythologized, the Antikythera mechanism, mechanical birds, automata, and devices described in scattered manuscripts. They remind you that human ingenuity is resilient, even when obscured by time, destruction, or indifference. Across continents, echoes resonate. Teotihuacan's mercury pools, Göbekli Tepe's sound-shaped pillars, Malta's hypergeum altering perception, Angkor and Cahokia recording celestial rhythms in stone. Patterns emerge, intention, precision, and ambition written into earth, limestone, and bronze. Oddities punctuate every chapter of this story. The Mune void above the Grand Gallery, thermal pockets in the King's Chamber, piezoelectric vibrations in granite, resonant galleries, each hints at knowledge beyond immediate comprehension. Some of it may have been practical, some ceremonial, some experimental. You feel the tug of imagination. What might these spaces, stones, and designs have accomplished in a civilization whose wisdom is only partially recovered? Even when details remain unknown, the shape and scale of human effort are evident. Humour, humanity, and labour thread through every era. Beer jars, graffiti, healed fractures, and laughter in the galleries contrast with the monument's scale and silence. Workers, rulers, scholars, and modern investigators form a continuous chain of curiosity and endeavour. You sense it, a pulse running beneath every block, every chamber, every alignment. Each life, each observation, each measurement is a note in a chorus that stretches across centuries. And yet the pyramid is more than human endeavour. It is endurance, persistence, and memory in stone. It resists finality, refuses full explanation, and continues to challenge understanding. Whether tomb, machine, ceremonial space, or something beyond imagination, it carries intention in every joint, alignment, and void. The labour of builders, the insight of rulers, the curiosity of modern minds, all converge in limestone that neither confirms nor denies, only endures. As the sun sets fully, stars begin to pierce the velvet night. The desert cools, shadows lengthen, and the pyramid stands indifferent, monumental, patient. You feel the weight of human curiosity, the resonance of creation, and the echo of knowledge lost and preserved. The stones endure, listening longer than any theory, observing longer than any scrutiny, and waiting patiently for understanding that may never fully arrive. Perhaps one day someone will reconstruct a fragment, measure a vibration, or decode an alignment, revealing a glimmer of insight hidden for millennia. Perhaps the pyramid's full purpose will remain forever unknowable, a monument to human ambition and ingenuity, to silence and memory alike. And in that space between knowledge and mystery, between stone and imagination, you realize the story is not only in the past, it is in the reflection, the wonder, and the quiet of the listener who pauses to consider what endures. The pyramid waits, it listens, it holds, and so do you.